EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, April 27th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Adrienne Buller, author of The Value of a Whale on the Illusions of Green Capitalism. And later in the show, Marshawn, Brewer, and Mark Himmelstein, members of the Fordham Bargaining Committee, are with us to discuss their walkout. Meanwhile, Republicans passed their anti-food stamps budget in the House by a narrow margin, with 4 Republicans defecting. It's DOA in the Senate. Republican West Virginia Governor Jim Justice files paperwork to run for Joe Manchin's Senate seat. Manchin's favorability's in the toilet right now in his home state, so he might not even run for re-election. He's saying he might run for president, too. So good luck with that, buddy. Disney is suing Ron DeSantis over his political attacks on the company. They have some deep pockets. Tucker Carlson's firing from Fox appears to have been due to texts from the Dominion lawsuit, the ones that have been redacted to the public, so we don't even know. But Fox is telling the press they were that bad. U.S. growth continues to slow, signaling more signs of a recession. It's what the Fed wanted. Montana's Republican legislature, I should say, has officially expelled the state's only trans lawmaker, Zoe Zephyr, banning her from the House floor for the rest of the legislative session.
For hurting their feelings.
Isn't that what we call cancel culture?
Yeah, it's cancel culture. It's, moderation, taking to attack your free speech, all these sorts of things.
All that stuff. Meanwhile, the DOJ has filed a lawsuit against Tennessee over its gender-affirming care ban. That's good to see. Elon Musk met with Chuck Schumer yesterday to discuss AI regulation. Why? Why, Chuck? This guy's an idiot.
Apparently there's a Tesla plant upstate.
The Buffalo one. Was that the one that workers were striking at and trying to unionize at, and Elon Musk was crushing it? Maybe don't meet with that guy, Chuck.
Horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Oklahoma's pardon board has denied clemency in the case of Richard Glossip, whose guilt is highly disputed. His execution is now scheduled next month. No one should be executed in this country, regardless of their guilt.
I'm not an anti-government person, but I don't believe the government should have the right to take your life.
Radical opinion.
Call me a libertarian.
Yeah. 3-day ceasefire set to expire in Sudan tonight. Fears growing that the extension won't be reached and more violence will resume. South Korean President Yoon addressing the joint meeting of Congress today. A federal appeals court has rejected Trump's attempts to stop Pence from testifying in the election interference grand jury case. And lastly, E. Jean Carroll, who's accused Trump of rape, on the witness stand in the trial today. One of the many legal tangles Trump is in right now. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's just a reminder that capital punishment is one of the most disgusting things that we do in this country. The fact that this guy has had to appeal multiple times, has had to live with his looming death over his... Biden should pardon him.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's get to it. Among honestly everybody on death row.
There should be nobody on that sort of system. Like, people are shocked by like the Anders Breivik in Norway, the Norway mass killer who his term comes up every like 10 to 20 years and they have to just resentence him. But that's better than just this warehousing of people for life, or indeed like just killing them with like drug cocktails or firing squads or whatever. It's all barbaric and it shouldn't be part of a government.
It doesn't. I mean, honestly, a firing squad might be a little less painful, but like we're picking among just a bunch of horrible options. Yeah. You have to, when people die by lethal injection, they inject a paralyzing agent into them so that they don't seize around, because the pain is to make it not so uncomfortable for the spectators to see someone dying in front of them.
To, just protect the aesthetic.
It's a branding exercise for the death penalty. Anyway, it's just myself and Matt today. Bradley's out because he has, well-deserved time off. He's out today and tomorrow. But let's start here with Tucker Carlson, dominating the news this week. He posted this cryptic social media message, speaking sort of in the cadence of his kind of Fox show, but being very vague, probably because Fox is publicly essentially saying we've got a lot of dirt on you and we might release it.
Yeah.
So he can't go too hard, but he does want to signal to the 4chan, 8chan conspiracy Alex Jones audience, of which he was the pipeline for Fox to. He connected those two things. That was the role that he served. That's what his legacy, in my opinion, is laundering white supremacist, like online edgelord commentary to the traditional Fox News audience, and dropping breadcrumbs for them so that he could kind of bring them into the fold. He's in that vein here. This is the message he posted on social media last night.
This is like 1984. Winston Smith, notes from the underground. Here we go.
Let's go.
Good evening. It's Tucker Carlson. One of the first things you realize when you step outside the noise for a few days is how many genuinely nice people there are in this country. Kind and decent people who really care about what's true, and a bunch of hilarious people also. A lot of those. It's got to be the majority of the population, even now. So that's heartening. The other thing you notice.
Okay, wait, hold on. So he stepped away outside of the noise. That's what you say when you get fired.
This sounds like Sarah Palin, like grasping for words. You step outside the noise. What is that? What do you mean the noise? You mean your highly lucrative cable news job?
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm, and a lot of hilarious people too. What is he talking about? So I guess he's just trying to somewhat show support for people who've been supporting him on social media, but I guess they've also been making him laugh.
There's so many nice people out there, and I've noticed from the studio that I recorded an interview with, like, Charles Murray.
He's nice and hilarious.
Is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we had them. Trust me, as someone who's participated. And yet at the same time, and this is the amazing thing, the undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change.
That's everything that you talked about on your show, which was the most highly rated cable show in the country.
Also, like, the demographic change, like, this is very, like, the science stuff is clearly like his COVID denial bullshit. But, like, they won't let you talk about demographic change. Like, that's pretty much what the entire Fox News has been hinting at for the last 10 years, is, like, this is an absolute disaster because there's demographic change happening. The
landmark, people in the wake of his firing were reposting, like, what will he be remembered for? I summarized my opinion of it, but there were some really egregious segments that stick out in my mind, including one from, I think, 2018, where he spoke about how immigrants are making us dirtier. Yeah. So, like,
and to reshape the electorate, just explicit great replacement theories.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that none of these debates can happen, they happened on your show. That's what he's trying to say, that he got canceled for telling the truth. but he can't go too far because apparently, again, these texts that were redacted in the Dominion lawsuit, the ones we didn't see, the ones that weren't just purely about how Trump is a demonic force and he hates him behind the scenes and doesn't believe the election lies, but says so publicly because he's trying to serve his audience and get the stock price up. That's what we saw. That Fox didn't care about that, really. It's the stuff apparently behind the scenes that they're floating to the New York Times that they have on him that really pissed them off.
I subscribed to Fox Nation for a little bit to watch the Tucker Carlson originals where he was unleashed and able to talk about the real things. And what he talked about was like tanning your nuts and how JFK wanted to make fat kids do gym class and the woke people got in his way. That's and also I'm glad that Tucker's had this revelation that everybody like seems to want to give him credit for, that cable news is bullshit. But and speaking of debates we don't remember we had 5 years later, I'm old enough to remember Jon Stewart telling this exactly to Tucker Carlson's face like 15 years ago. Like, your entire thing is bullshit. What are you doing? And Tucker just continued to do it for another 15 years, making $20 million a year.
That honestly, in terms of debates involving Tucker Carlson that I remember, the one that comes to mind, first one that comes to mind, since he didn't have a lot of debate on his program, really. He just had sycophants come on. And when he had the guy from Davos come on and to speak about taxation, he did not air the interview. Let's robust debate on the Tucker Carlson Tonight Show. Give me an effing break here. But that's what sticks out to me when he was called out as a hack to his face by Jon Stewart. So that's the debate that I'll remember.
Corporate power, natural resources. When was the last time you heard a legitimate debate about any of those issues? It's been a long time.
Not on this show.
Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. Suddenly, the United States looks very much like a one-party state. That's a depressing realization, but it's not permanent. Our current orthodoxies won't last.
Just to state like my interpretation, like everyone talks about this one party state, like, oh, we only have the one party is, capitalists. And to the extent that there are problems with the Democrats, it's mainly that the same ones that Republicans have, which is that on top of the racism on the Republican side, is that, capitalists run the parties. That's the one party.
Right, but the libertarians have no problem with that.
That's what's so funny about like
they want to say the Jews,
like
but
people
they can't.
like what is this real critique here? Like this, like Glenn Greenwald and everybody to like in that sort of mold, saying like, oh, Tucker Carlson willing to stand up to the liberal pieties. It's like I have problems with liberals, particularly like apology for like sort of I think capitalist authoritarianism basically. The problem with liberals to me is not the pieties. I think the pieties don't rank as far as they go, and that's a very, very big tell. Just a little bit more of this.
They're brain dead. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them. This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't.
That's why I got fired.
The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. At the same time, the liars who've been trying to silence them shrink, and they become weaker. That's the iron law of the universe. True things prevail. Where can you still find Americans saying true things? There aren't many places left, but there are some, and that's enough. As long as you can hear the words, there is hope. See you soon.
I mean, what a scaredy cat.
I'm motivated.
Name names, buddy.
The iron law of the universe.
God, that's like fundamentalist speak.
Yeah, I mean there's like no content there, and it's funny to watch him try to like sort of QAnon light it, like, oh, I'm fighting for truth thing, but also be afraid to say anything that Fox News is going to legally retaliate for. Yeah,
he and Don Lemon actually have retained a lawyer, same lawyer, same firm, who's going to try to get him some sort of settlement. I would guess that he'll get a little bit of a payout, but it's not going to be too much. It's the world keeps on spinning without Tucker Carlson. Like when Bill O'Reilly was gone, that was, wow. Ding dong, the witch is dead. We got him. And then Tucker Carlson replaces him doing the same shtick. These behemoth media legacy organizations, I feel like we've been saying for years and years and years how they're dying and their audience is aging out, but they're just so big, just in scale, that the machine's going to keep going, and there will be a new Tucker Carlson. He is not the force that he tried to portray himself as. He was a part of a forceful propaganda machine.
Yeah, he was riding a wave, and
yeah,
I am maybe a little bit. I downplay a little bit too much the overall impact of Tucker, but I do think it's notable that, like, what do you say he accomplished besides the ratings and the monologue stuff, which is just like, of course, like what you'd expect from Fox News. Like, he did the Jeremiah Wright video.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is
he just abandoned breaking news,
right? Exactly, but it's like even his, compared to like Limbaugh or something like that, like I think Tucker, even Glenn Beck, I think O'Reilly and Glenn Beck have, I think Tucker had this moment where everyone was watching cable because Trump was going to be booted out of office. Like, well done on capturing that. Guess what? Our ratings were very good too at that time.
Yeah.
And so like, I just think, like, I think it's good for people who know folks who were watching Tucker on a nightly basis, but this energy just kind of gets diffused more. And then you see different people bubble up. Like, you'll see Jesse Waters or someone like that fill in this vacuum.
There's an endless number of shameless people who are going to be willing to take this kind of slot. I would say that his major accomplishments, yes, laundering 4chan, 8chan talk, white supremacist talk onto television, mainstreaming things like Great Replacement Theory, and also what he was really trying to do towards the end was Viktor Orban, the Republican Party in the United States. I think he's had mixed results on that front, but some of this pro-natalist stuff, fixation on birth rates, and that being a way to connect kind of the evangelical desire to control women and contraception, and this, like, overall immigrants are dirty mentality. That's what he'll be remembered for, but I think he'll be forgotten more easily than he would probably like to admit to himself, because that was not very compelling. I'll say that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Good luck in your weirdly finished cabin.
Yeah. I guess that is his home studio there. Very manly.
Yeah.
All right.
Charles Murray has the address too. Sorry.
We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to be speaking with Adrienne Buller. We are back, and we are joined now by Adrienne Buller, senior fellow at Commonwealth, author of The Value of a Whale on the Illusions of Green Capitalism. Adrienne, thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
For sure. So I like to start with the title often, but in the case of your book, I found your talk about, like, the beauty of whales and how you loved them so much growing up, to be a really moving way to kind of introduce people to the fool's gold that is green capitalism. Let's start there. Why you chose to title your book after this animal that you love so much growing up in Canada.
So as you said there, I grew up, was lucky enough to grow up on the west coast of British Columbia. So had the very kind of fortunate position of being kind of like embedded in nature in quite a profound way, sort of from the jump. And the title of the book comes from a 2019 study published by a team at the International Monetary Fund that came from, I think, kind of an interesting premise about, how can we think about the relationship between sort of nature conservation and the climate crisis, and how can we get the private sector to help fund those kind of challenges. And they tried to arrive at the kind of dollar value for a whale, so for an individual whale, and arrived at the kind of tidy sum of about $2 million US per whale, about $1 trillion for the global stock. And that's kind of based on various things like their role in sequestering carbon, but also things like ecotourism, so like whale watching tours, and then arrived at that figure. And for me, it was kind of this very kind of striking and almost perfect in a way distillation of the kind of often quite obscene kind of logics that underlie a lot of what I talk about in the rest of the book about kind of green capitalism as a framework.
Yeah, I mean, we're assigning monetary value to nature and to animals, but I mean, it's really just an extension of neoliberal policy assigning monetary value to human labor. I mean, we spoke about this earlier in the week, but the myth of labor as capital, as opposed to capital being capital, it overinflates the value of one's labor as a way to like kind of flatten the power dynamics under capitalism. And it really says something that is the lens in which so many NGOs and larger groups in this space are choosing to tackle the climate crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I think the default approach, right, because we live under capitalism, is that, the only way to address any of the big challenges we face is through the sort of vehicle of the market. And if that is the assumption that you take at firsthand, then, the only way that the market can engage is through prices, right? Anything that doesn't have a price is, external to the market and therefore can't be engaged with within it. And so, that is the approach that informs everything from valuing whales and the way that I think a lot of governments and sort of NGOs, international organizations are thinking about biodiversity, but, also in the much more familiar form in, carbon pricing, something that's been, or that was before the kind of Inflation Reduction Act was kind of like the big debate in prospective American climate policy. And yeah, I think that kind of logic necessarily seeps into sort of every approach to climate and ecological crisis if your starting assumption is that this has to be resolved through sort of market mechanisms.
Well, that is an underlying assumption for a majority of if not all, of people in power, with some limited exceptions. But let's rewind a little bit to when capitalists, power players began to understand that this is how they could move forward with climate policy, because I grew up in an era when climate denial was widely accepted by a lot of people, and we've come a long way in a sense, but the solutions that have been coalesced behind, as you say, are less than ideal.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, sort of green capitalism, as I engage with it, this idea of, market actors seeking to not only engage with, but sort of advance climate policy and the climate agenda. In some ways, you can understand it, as you said, as, a mark of some degree of progress, right? So we've moved from the kind of overt denial into a space where, while that absolutely still happens, it's, relatively at the fringes. And, to be a credible player, big financial firms, big corporates feel that at least rhetorically, they need to have a position on climate. They need to be seen to be engaging on these issues. And I think, that is a marker of some degree of progress. But exactly as you said, there has been a very clear result from that, which is that, this advance is being led in many ways by and shaped by sort of the interests of large corporates and large financial firms, particularly, the asset management industry, which I'm sure we'll come to, and which is a big focus of the book. And I think that's a real problem from, not only the questions of kind of justice and sort of democratic planning and input through this process of decarbonizing, but also just from sort of very basic hurdles of actually curbing emissions. And we can unpack that a bit. But I think a lot of the time, the kind of market-led solutions are focused on kind of efficiency, on where profits can be made, on where risks can be minimized for sort of private sector actors. And the outcomes of cutting emissions or sort of halting biodiversity loss, those kinds of things are almost like secondary to those sort of first set of imperatives.
Well, let's go there then now. What are some of the hallmarks of those imperatives as imagined by market forces, NGOs, banks, etc.?
Yeah, the way that I simplify it is like there are the climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, those represent, I guess, like two things to the private sector, one of which is a kind of unprecedented threat. So in many ways, the climate crisis represents a genuine threat to capitalism's ability to like reproduce itself. And so that is now very much understood. And so there's a response of, how can we address that threat and minimize the risks to our operations? And the other is an opportunity. And, Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, which is the biggest sort of US investment firm, I think he's described the climate crisis several times now as, the greatest investment opportunity in history. And so there's kind of two sides of that coin. So a threat to be managed and an opportunity to be seized. And everyone from sort of major energy firms, but also throughout the financial sector is trying to marry those interests. And that comes across in lots of different policy areas. The carbon pricing is kind of a favorite solution of a lot of these firms. Can
you explain that, what carbon pricing is?
Yeah, so carbon pricing kind of does what it says on the tin. So applying a single kind of universal price is the kind of goal to every unit of carbon. So that in theory, it sounds like, if you are a big emitter, then you'll pay more because you're paying per unit of carbon. And it's meant to be this kind of very elegant mechanism to internalize carbon emissions to the market so that firms will be motivated to cut that cost by curbing emissions, and they'll do so in a way that's efficient and doesn't require, state interventionism to kind of get that done. And for firms, that's quite a desirable opportunity insofar as it doesn't, require direct regulation in a way that might infringe on their ability to kind of do what they want.
It's incentives versus regulation.
Exactly. Yeah. And it has an element in theory of like there being a stick. So not just carrot, some firms can make a lot of money out of it, but also a stick in theory. But I think there's also this tacit kind of understanding that carbon pricing broadly can't and won't and has not to date been implemented at a level that could actually make it effective, because the effects of that could be so kind of devastating to the incomes and kind of livelihoods of just average people, that it's broadly, where carbon pricing regimes are in place, the price is usually far lower than it should be in theory, according to kind of economic models, to actually deliver anything like the kind of pace of decarbonization that we need. So, economists will still say, a carbon price is the ideal solution, but, the actual global carbon price stands at, $2-3 a ton. And economists would think that, at an absolute minimum, it should be at $40. Some say all the way up to $14,000. So all that to say, we're kind of nowhere near the version of that policy that would really kind of hinder firms' interests. And so it's far preferable, I think, to kind of direct regulation that might actually say, you just can't pollute, or you can't extract fossil fuels, or, use coal power plants.
Well, because it also, talk about incentives, it incentivizes them to maybe just do some of these practices in, say, the global south, right?
Exactly. So that is the other trick, right? So unless you have sort of a global universal carbon price, which again is the kind of like far off dream of economists, then you do have all these questions around sort of carbon leakage, around kind of offshoring to other places. And you also have in the kind of incentive section, carbon pricing by definition doesn't really care how you cut carbon. And so it might be that, and this is what's happened with the European Union's emissions trading scheme, which is probably the most kind of successful and well-known of these mechanisms, instead of, cutting carbon in a permanent kind of durable way, in a way that would actually, bring renewables online or other forms of actually zero carbon industry, you've broadly just seen kind of short temporary transitions from coal to gas, or little tweaks to energy efficiency that then kind of leave us flatlining a little bit. And the other is that in order to make this work in a market, it broadly requires an ability to sort of trade these units. And that kind of requires carbon offsets, which are sort of an asset that you can create that says, you can buy the rights to pollute and you can pay me, carbon offset provider, and I will plant, 1,000 trees somewhere. And so that is also, a whole new industry that sprung up that is, hugely successful in kind of selling the idea that you can sort of pay to pollute.
How does carbon capture play into this? Because, that also seems to be a favorite of neoliberal economists and politicians.
Carbon capture is the ultimate kind of tool for maintaining business as usual, right? And so, there's a part of me that would, that would love if it worked, but it's broadly just not a viable technology at scale whatsoever. I think the biggest kind of trial of the largest carbon offset project released its results a few months back, and it had captured like a third of their kind of low ambition for the project, and it was meant to be the one that would be the big breakthrough. And so leaning, I think, on carbon capture and storage as heavily as fossil fuel giants do is absolutely a way to kind of get around needing to actually change their business models whatsoever. But, so is carbon offsetting just as much. Airlines absolutely love it. I'm sure anyone who's taken a flight in the past couple of years has been offered the option to pay to offset their flight. And so it's absolutely a very convenient mechanism for saying broadly, we don't need to change business models. We don't need to do any of the hard work of decarbonizing. We can just pay a little bit extra. Profitable new industry springs up, everybody's happy, and job is done.
Right there, we've solved it. It's so funny too, because we've covered segments on Fox News, for example, targeting ESG investing, right? And saying that is this mandate from the Biden administration, which is of course so far from the case. But environmental, social governance investing has been like really exploding over the past 3, 4, 5 years, I would say. And it's another way to, I get, first, to me, it feels like corporate PR, but I'm curious about your take on like the preponderance of that specifically over the past few years.
Yeah, I have to say, like, obsessed with the whole kind of woke capital backlash that's been unfolding in the US, kind of anti-ESG campaign from the right, which I find really fascinating because it's a kind of really mask off moment for the right on, this is ostensibly, a free market doing exactly what it's meant to do, which is, corporate actors acting in their own interest. They perceive, ESG as a framework to be in their own interests as a profit-seeking corporation. And, the right is now really angry that the free market is not doing the things it wants it to do. So it's time to sort of crack down on that, which I find quite fun to watch unfold. But yeah, ESG has been around far longer than Biden. And, broadly is a mechanism for corporates, but mostly the financial system, to try and kind of do some box ticking to understand how they should kind of allocate capital according to these criteria. So environmental, social, and governance criteria, although admittedly the E in ESG is by far, the most kind of relevant most of the time. People kind of disregard the S and G a lot. But yeah, ESG is kind of this idea that by sort of looking at firms that might comply with certain criteria that, some analysts at a firm establish, that you can sort of mitigate your exposure to the risks associated with, climate regulation or with human rights violations in your supply chains, et cetera. And in doing so, you can sort of maximize your returns by minimizing those risks, and you can sort of do well by doing good. And it kind of exploded, particularly up to and during the height of the pandemic. So 2020 was like the best year for ESG. Because it seemed like it was coming true that this kind of logic of just reducing your exposure to the bad things meant that you could sort of maximize your own returns and broadly have kind of a clean conscience. But the key thing there is that, the vast majority of what happens in ESG is, like you said, kind of corporate PR is part of it, absolutely. But even where firms are actually doing what they say they're doing, which is, eliminating the kind of risky companies from their portfolios, there is a really critical missing step there that is just totally ignored, which is that, cutting out a few fossil fuel companies from your fund does not mean that you're reinvesting any of that capital in sort of the industries that we need to see for the kind of green transition. There's absolutely no kind of linkage there. And so what we've got is, firms that are minimizing their financial risk without doing anything to kind of try to actually drive forward decarbonization, which is, I think, how it's often sort of promoted, right? So if you look at the big ESG funds, I looked the other day at Vanguard, which is, again, one of the biggest US managers, and its kind of flagship US ESG fund is broadly just like the S&P 500 with like one or two fossil fuel companies removed. So it's, its top holdings, which are like a fifth of the fund, is, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, another tech firm, and, one or two other big techs. And, that is hardly going to be like driving forward the transition to a decarbonized economy. And I think that for me is the critical aspect of ESG.
Yeah, that's an incredibly broad definition of ESG, right? Because as you say, it's just the absence of investing in big oil as opposed to the investment in technology or in companies that would push things forward. Kind of restating what you said there, but I'm also curious too about what you think of the real push, and this is now from the Inflation Reduction Act as well, for electric vehicles to be the catch-all climate solution here, as opposed to, say, I don't know, making our transit systems run in a way where people can feasibly use public transit throughout the country. But I mean, even just regionally, where areas where we already have a lot of transit lines, they're just not updated or expanded. That is another way to maintain the status quo and not undercut auto manufacturers or anything like that. You can still use these credits to manufacture cars, but it's not the most sustainable way forward.
No, you've touched on it there. I think, electric vehicles better in many ways than having, a sort of conventional combustion engine on the road, but absolutely not without sort of physical impact and cost, right? In terms of the materials that go into, particularly the batteries. And there's an academic that, many viewers might know called Thea Rea-Francos, who does sort of brilliant work kind of tracing the impacts of specifically, the lithium mining industry throughout the global south and sort of South America in particular, because it's such a kind of water intensive and environmentally destructive form of mining. It has major impacts on sort of indigenous and local communities in Chile and neighboring countries. And so there are real concerns to be had about sort of relying on just replacing, the abundance of personal vehicles in the US or anywhere in the world, one-to-one, that is kind of just conveniently sort of sidelined for two reasons, I think. One of which is, the kind of real politic of passing climate policy in the US and in many other places, Canada, notwithstanding, is that you need to kind of convince people often that there'll be minimal disruption to the kind of lifestyles that they're maybe accustomed to, rather than trying to, I think, tell people the much more positive story that, your car kind of sucks. Commuting is terrible. Your car probably spends, I think the statistic is like 90% of its lifespan parked for the average vehicle. 50 square kilometers of the city of London where I live are taken up by parking spaces that could be housing or green space. All of these terrible things about having a society dominated by individual cars, could be turned into a very positive story about how we could totally organize mobility differently and in a way that's just much better for everybody. And, so I think the politics of that are probably, in my view, sort of poorly done, but understandable in terms of kind of not wanting to rock the boat. But the other thing is that from the green capitalism perspective, that's broadly necessary, right? So, for the kind of green capitalist approach to policymaking, the idea is that, all of the things that we want to have in a kind of like green, low carbon future can and must be profit making and profitable. And so for the corporate sector, for investors, having ideally decommodified, but maybe let's just say affordable kind of decarbonized mass public transit, that is a far less appealing prospect than, everyone having their sort of vehicles replaced one-to-one with EVs. And so that kind of logic, I think, pervades as well, right? Which is that if we leave this transition to, we kind of abdicate the question of planning and strategy, and we leave it to the profit motive, then this is the kind of result that we'll inevitably see. Right.
And I mean, this is the fatal flaw, and it's it completely embedded in every element of the Inflation Reduction Act, unfortunately. I mean, it is a market-based climate bill, and that's not to say that it's better than doing nothing. Of course it is, but you can see someone like Joe Manchin's fingerprints all over this, and that's what makes it so alien to what we were talking about when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez introduced the Green New Deal in her freshman year or freshman term as a member of Congress. That's so there were, of course, market solutions and market incentives in that an initial proposal, but the more robust kind of infrastructure elements, as opposed to tax credits and incentives for private corporations, those were included as well. And it's a real missed opportunity that we had a hostage taker in Manchin as the 50th vote in the Senate, because really, as you lay out so well, this is going to be insufficient, wildly so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act for me is such an interesting case because in many ways it was this kind of very marked departure from what had dominated American climate politics, for every year prior to the IRA that it had been discussed, right? Which was carbon pricing. Ever since Waxman-Markey, that has always been the fixation, and broadly something that's always failed. And so there is this real pivot from sort of pricing and sort of tweaks to the market to, what can be understood broadly as, an industrial strategy with some green bits. And I think that is a really positive shift in that kind of basic sense. But you're absolutely right that that's come with these kind of incredible carve outs for, yes, there's some direct public investment, and it's very substantial in many ways, but the most of what's going to happen in terms of investment through this bill will be, subsidy for private sector actors to kind of get their hands on a lot of this infrastructure and a lot of the kind of industries of this kind of green future. And, I think there's a lot of people who say, what's really the problem with that? What we just want is to see, investment flow in, and we just want to see these industries built up. And I think, there's a grain of truth to that. I think there's, there's an urgency to what we're facing that means that we have to take, I guess, some compromises. But I think the real danger that I see is that, what we are doing is exactly what I just described, right? Which is handing over the question of kind of planning and of ensuring that we kind of do this in a way that is not only, fast enough and at the kind of scale we need to see, but that is also kind of based in sort of justice and not just kind of massively sidelining and harming kind of poorer communities of color, communities in the global South, which is like something that often happens with kind of industrial strategy and industrial policy. And, instead we're handing over the reins to private sector motivations and broadly to sort of large kind of titanic investment firms like BlackRock or some of the big private equity firms in an industry that's hugely concentrated. So it's this kind of very undemocratic process, you might say, in terms of, who is really going to be driving forward where capital flows. And that's going to be based in the specific set of interests of kind of a handful of investment firms, rather than thinking strategically about what it is that we really need. And, accepting that one, not everything that we need for the transition to a kind of decarbonized society can be made profitable. Things like care, for example, and other forms of kind of service work that aren't the kind of conventional things that we think of as green, but that are absolutely going to need to be kind of scaled up in the kind of society that we want to see. Those are sectors that are never going to be appealing or profitable in the way that, the private sector might want. And the other is that, everything that can be made profitable shouldn't necessarily be, right? So just because it can be profitable doesn't mean that we should, have things be more costly to people because, firms have the incentive to maximize their profit and pay out to shareholders. And I think that kind of dual logic is very much present and alive in the IRA. But it does have some fun carve-outs, like the kind of direct pay question for sort of municipal governments and sort of not-for-profits, which is exciting compared to, again, sort of previous subsidy regimes. But I like to give like a slight silver lining rather than
I appreciate it. Yeah. My last question here, and I'll let you go, but I wanted to see if you could expand even more on the point about how lithium mining is kind of another reboot of our offsetting of the worst of the climate catastrophe and capitalism onto the global south. This is what we talk about when we talk about climate injustice and inequity. And it's important, I think, that like a lot of the youth climate movement is a lot more cognizant of including voices from the global south where these effects are being felt. But lithium mining in particular, because this is going to be a natural resource thing that the United States is going to be extractive once again in Latin America over this. Explain that to the audience if you don't mind, Adrienne.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we often talk about when we think about batteries or some of the industries, people talk about critical minerals, these things that are, very destructive forms of mining, but that are in tiny supply. And so lithium, because it is actually a very abundant resource, there's no kind of shortage of lithium, has often been kind of sidelined because people assume that, because it's abundant, that's kind of fine. And a lot of it to date has come from kind of Australia. But going forward, to meet the projections that sort of governments have set for what they would like the uptake of personal kind of electric vehicles to be, the International Energy Agency projects that, we need to, from 2020 levels, that lithium demand will increase by 40-fold just by 2040. So over a 20-year span, 40 times as much lithium that needs to be mined just to meet the demand for electric vehicles. And, that is going to be potentially catastrophic to the regions where most of the kind of unexploited lithium remains, which is broadly kind of the Atacama Desert in South America. And a lot of the time, these are areas that are sort of directly relied upon by indigenous communities. They're also usually incredibly sort of water sort of scarce. So kind of desert areas, salt flats, high in the kind of mountains. And lithium itself, is an incredibly water intensive process, one of the forms of extracting it. So you kind of use water shot underground and you kind of get these lithium salts coming through the brine. And it's already having sort of very devastating impacts on communities' abilities to, sustain their own kind of water supplies just to exist, let alone to engage in the kind of agriculture that they would normally, form part of their economy. It's also potentially very destructive to biodiversity and to some of the sort of water systems that nature relies upon. And so it is absolutely, by neglecting to, I think it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to think about, we're so desperate to be like, please give us any kind of climate solution and any policy that is going to cut emissions, and EVs are included in that it feels uncomfortable to then admit that there are serious environmental and social justice questions related to that. But I think it absolutely needs to be sort of front and center in the conversation, not least because there are so many ways to avoid it, like we've already touched upon by, thinking about other forms of kind of mass transit and thinking about EVs as kind of like a last resort used for those who absolutely can't get around in other ways, and embracing other forms of how we could organize our society and resources.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Adrienne Buller, a senior fellow at Commonwealth, author of The Value of a Whale on the Illusions of Green Capitalism. We will put a link to your book in the podcast, YouTube descriptions, and all of that. and at majority.fm. Thanks, Adrienne. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to play an interview I did earlier this morning with Marshawn Brewer and Mark Himmelstein, members of the Fordham Bargaining Committee, who walked out on Monday in the midst of their contract negotiations. We'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by two of the members of the Fordham Bargaining Committee, Marshawn Brewer, who is on the line on the phones with us, and Mark Himmelstein, who we have over video. Thank you guys so much for coming on and speaking with us today.
Thanks so much, Emma. We really appreciate you having us on.
For sure. So, Marshawn, I'll start with you here. For our viewers who might not be aware of what's happening at Fordham, hundreds of graduate student workers have walked out this week amid contract negotiations with the school. Can you give us like a quick rundown of how you, one, came to form a union last May, and also how it got to the point that a walkout in this way was so necessary?
All right. Yeah. So a quick synopsis is, I'm a second year. So I kind of jumped in my first year with the organizing effort, just helping out on the side. I never expected to get pushed into the forefront like this. But it really started basically COVID. COVID was the genesis of the union, the working conditions during COVID, the fact that people were feeling disrespected by the administration during COVID, and the lack of resources really to cope with the conditions that they were under. Our friend Kieran, who really pushed the union forward in the initial stages, is now a union organizer in his own right, doing other things. He really ignited the union, and basically we've gone from there. In terms of like why we have, we won our election last year also by a huge margin. So we won by like 95% of the vote. So it was really a resounding victory. But why we're actually at the point now where we have to do a walkout pertains to the inertia of the administration when it comes to bargaining. So we have not been bargaining with them to faith. They basically want to stick to the status quo in almost every single form of negotiation. And so we really had no other option to push the momentum of the negotiations forward, but to really start a campaign where we show that we can withhold our labor. It's not the tactic that we desire to use most of all, but it's a necessary tactic in order for us to get the leverage we need in order to get the contract that is necessary.
And Mark, how inspired have you all been by seeing some of the major actions by graduate student workers unions around the country? This seems to be a real kind of explosion within academia that, we're really excited over here from our perspective, but from you guys on the ground, how much has that bolstered your resolve really to get to a point where you're going to walk out, and that walkout started on Monday?
Oh, it's huge. It's been, like you mentioned, it's been a movement that's, really been sort of an avalanche since we won recognition from the NLRA as actual employees before that, before 2016, before that decision. It wasn't clear whether we were formally considered employees. And so since then, there's been just this huge wave of unionization. And just to speak to, I think, what you mentioned, which is these issues in academia as an industry where, folks like at the bottom rung, like grad workers, like adjuncts, like postdocs, we're the ones who make these universities run. And people have this perspective of college life in America, or university life as this ivory tower. And, we're not in the ivory tower. We're in the basement of the ivory tower. And we're getting by on $30,000 a year living in New York City. Is that like a lot of us aren't allowed to even earn more than that? It's just, I don't know how anyone can see that as a tenable situation that can keep going. And so we're really hoping that we're part of a larger movement that's just going to not just change life at Fordham, but change the academic job industry just in general.
Well, the cost of living is so key here, and housing, I know, has been central in terms of what you guys have been organizing, or part of your organizing effort. Marshawn, can you talk a bit about that? Because I live here in Brooklyn. I understand the cost of living is out of control, and those numbers that you just laid out, Mark. I mean, that seems like it's impossible to live, especially if you're precluded from making wages elsewhere.
Well, I mean, the housing situation is so drastic because we have to understand that the university is also a lot of its labor comes from international students, and many of them come here without the requisite kind of paperwork necessary because of the way the visa process works for them to get a house. So sometimes international students are basically homeless and relying upon other grad workers to basically supply housing for them. So that's one aspect of the housing situation. A secondary aspect is, we can't afford rent. So we have to live with multiple roommates. We have to figure out strange arrangements to get, guarantors and things of that sort. Like you almost have to either depend upon a wealthy benefactor, a wealthy member of your family, or basically depend upon like housing up with like 6 or 7 people whom you might not know. And so all of these factors are kind of impacting this, and this housing insecurity that we're dealing with impacts the way we can do our job. So if we're housing insecure, if we don't know where our next meal is coming from, if our situation is precarious, then we're not going to be able to produce the best teaching results for our students. And so we care about our students. We want to make sure that our security is also linked to their flourishing. You can't have a flourishing university if the people who are teaching most of a great deal of the classes for undergraduates are in a state of stress and housing insecurity.
Absolutely. And Mark, I mean, what has the administration's response been? If you could summarize it a bit, it seems quite acrimonious, or at least from their end, they've been pretty stubborn, forcing you guys into making this kind of decision to walk out. How have those talks gone, and what would you like our audience to know about what it's like to stand up, honestly, to an administration like this?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question in 2 ways. So the first way is what's happening at the bargaining table, where the best way to describe what's happening there is what we call surface bargaining. So essentially, they're just trying to run out the clock, break our spirit by moving as slowly as possible. As Sean mentioned, they haven't made a single proposal to us that, in our view, offers any improvement over the status quo. And we've been in bargaining for over 50 hours for 7-8 months. And so not a single proposal that they've made has acknowledged that we need change. It's just all been, they retain full discretion. They've been haggling with us over what we call just cause, which is, the standard for which employees are often disciplined in these contracts. And they have this just cause contract, just cause clause in all of their other contracts, all their other union contracts. They have it, but they've been refusing to even put that term in the contract, which is just like, if you know anything about how these negotiations go, it's just such a perfect encapsulation of their bad faith. The flip side of that is that the public discourse around our union has been entirely one-sided. Until we did this walkout, the university seemed to not even want to acknowledge our existence. The public communications about us there just weren't any. And once we announced the walkout, since then, President Tanya Tetlow and Provost Jacobs at Fordham have started sending some communications about the union. It's obviously very hostile in tone for the most part. Tanya recently said on the news, she hopes to work with us on mutually beneficial solutions. And I find it so funny that she would say that, because these are words we've said at the table. And when we say them, they just kind of nod at us and then move on. And so they're taking our words and using them in public. We're perfectly happy to come up with creative solutions. We understand the university. We want our solutions to benefit the university. We're not here to take away from the Fordham community. We want to lift up the Fordham community. That's what we see our role as. And so just to hear that it was kind of both funny and ironic and infuriating.
And Marshawn, I mean, what's your sense of where the administration's priorities are here? Because, honestly, if the educational experience is supposed to be valuable for the students at Fordham, treating the people most responsible for that educational experience, frontline educators, right? What you guys are doing, interacting with students, supposedly, the human element of the educational experience. Where would you say their priorities are more focused? Because I'm trying to look up their endowment right now. My guess is they have some wiggle room to pay you guys fairly.
Well, first of all, it's $1 billion, Emma. So I'll give you the
there we
insight
go.
right there. So you can, yeah, there you go. So secondarily, we have to look at what's happening at Fordham within the context of the neoliberalization, the labor flexibility process that's happened in America since Carter, going through Reagan. And the university are just basically embodying that same spirit. We're gig workers in education and academia. Okay, let's put it to its most strict terms. Okay, and so the idea is that we go through this grueling process of training. We put our head down. We basically supplicate to the powers that be and the processes that have been. And eventually we have the opportunity, possibly at the end of the road, of getting a place in academia, a tenure track job, and so on and so forth. But what we're seeing with these unionization efforts in California, at Temple, at Rutgers, is that there's going to have to be a restructuring of the university in the same way there's going to have to be a restructuring of the general economy. Okay, the neoliberalization and labor flexibility that is bearing down on the entire country is bearing down upon us as well, and we are trying to make change in that. This is a project not only for academia, but for the broader left in general, and we are simply at a focal point of this larger battle, not only with economics, but as we see with Florida and DeSantis, with some cultural things as well.
Right. Well, I mean, exactly. That's going to be the next frontier, right? Essentially, places like, what is it, the New School in Florida, where they're replacing academics with essentially political goons. That's a whole different story on that front. But Mark, last question for you here. It's been 3 days since the walkout started, right? Do you have hope that some of what you are calling for is starting to be listened to and that the pressure is being felt on the administration at this point?
Yeah, actually, I do have a little bit of hope that it is. So the first day, so this was a 3-day unfair labor practice strike. So we've gone back to work now for now. This was sort of us showing them where we're at with this at the end of this spring semester and letting them know what might happen if they don't come to the table and work with us in good faith in the fall. But the first day of the walkout, we had a bargaining session, and it was amazing, just the experience of being in that bargaining room with 150 people behind me and their voices from the picket line pouring through the room. I could hear them we could hear them in the room. And for the first time, the very first time, we actually felt a little movement at the table. Like, I'm being dead serious. We haven't felt any movement at the table this entire time. And we felt it in two ways. The most salient way is we've had this battle over non-disclosure agreements where we're asking Fordham to stop using non-disclosure agreements to silence the complainants in cases of harassment and discrimination. And to date, their public messaging had been, "Oh, we don't do this to begin with. We won't do this." But they wouldn't promise us that in a contract. And they finally at this session agreed that they would ban them for members of our bargaining unit. Now, we don't think that's sufficient. We think they should not use them for anyone in the Fordham community. This is a health and safety issue in our view, where if anyone is being silenced about harassment and discrimination, this is a threat to the safety of everyone, including our bargaining unit members. So we think this is fair game for our contract to ban NDAs wholesale. They haven't done that yet, but they at least agreed to ban them for members of the bargaining unit. So that was a big move. They also finally started asking questions about our international student worker issues, which they hadn't. They were just rejecting our proposals, categorically rejecting them, no discussion. And they finally actually started proactively asking some questions. They haven't given us anything in writing. I'm not overwhelmingly optimistic that this is moving in a productive direction yet. But if they do follow through on their questions, I think it'll be a real sign that we've gotten somewhere and that they've heard our message and that they know what we're capable of as a union.
Well, guys, thanks so much for joining me, and thanks to my college roommate, freshman year roommate Nicola, who set this up, who's a part of your guys' bargaining unit here. I just want to see if there's a way that our audience can help, if there's a strike fund, or if there's any, obviously showing solidarity if you're in the New York City area, but financially, what could our audience do? And we can put a link to that kind of stuff in the podcast and YouTube descriptions.
We just launched a strike fund. We just announced it yesterday at the end of our walkout, and we'll absolutely send you that link, and that would be amazing. Thank you so much. For now, this is mostly for our hourly workers who walked off the job so bravely and are losing their wages for the last 3 days. Most of us are not hourly workers, and I don't think Fordham is going to try to take our wages away. If they do, so help them. But the hourly workers will, and that's why we launched it when we did, to make sure that they get made whole.
Okay. Yes. We pre-recorded this interview, so by the time you guys are watching this, the links will be in the description below. Thank you guys both so much, Mark and Marshawn, of the Fordham Grad Workers Fordham Bargaining Committee, I should say. Really appreciate you both joining us today.
Thanks so much, Emma. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are back. Gonna wrap up the first hour of this program, head into the fun half. Appreciate you all. If you can, if you're listening to this program, enjoying this program, please become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com.
If you've been appreciating the fewer amounts of advertisements that we've been doing at the top of the show and would like to see us not try to remedy the lack there, more members subscribing will, let Sam sit on his ass.
Yeah, exactly. Let Sam be lazy on on that front and become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. We do fun stuff in the fun half. When you become a member, you have access to the fun half for free. You'll see crazy things like Sam throwing objects at us, which is what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
He
a little bit Klobuchar-y yesterday.
It was, yeah. I mean, binders everywhere. I don't know. He's a tyrant. What can I say? But support us at least. Join the majority.report.com. Matt, what is happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, we had Elias Cepeda on to talk about the Manosphere. Elias is a sort of a radical writer, but also a MMA guy regularly sparring in the fight game. And so I was curious what his perspective on Andrew Tate is, because it's, we are exposed to all these freaks, these reactionary sort of mouthpieces, and it sometimes feels like, does anybody else know? Is anybody else aware of Jordan Peterson? And to see that, actually these people are entering through vectors of like mixed martial arts or something like that is concerning, but also makes you realize that, okay, I guess there is some relevance here to focusing on this. So we talked about Andrew Tate, some of the legal issues where he sounds, exactly like what a sex trafficker would sound like on some of the websites, and as well as why he might be seen as like a model for masculinity, which is pretty depressing. And we also talk about Zoe Zephyr and put the lie to this whole Tucker Carlson is an exposer of, I guess, quote, liberal pieties, whatever that means, and why he should not be missed. Check that out, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
We have Binder in a second, but I just I don't care about liberal pieties that much.
No, liberalism, like the pieties are just like
aesthetic.
what liberals do. Well, it's like what liberals do to apologize for like the actual bad things of liberalism.
Yeah. Right. It's cringy, but it's like that's just a useful way for him to attack the Democrats.
Yeah, like liberalism saying racism is bad while also like not doing anything to like really address like structural racism is like that's the problem with the pieties, not like the pieties themselves.
In and of itself being annoying. Yeah, exactly. We're gonna bring Matt Binder on.
Bing.
We're gonna bing all over the place, as Trump would say.
As Knicks fans would say too.
We'd say bing bong. That's what we do say. Holy shit. Knicks in 5. Anyway, speaking of that, on ESPN, we did a whole mock draft, and the draft is tonight, so you can check how wrong I'm inevitably going to be, but I do really enjoy the exercise, and I did it. Went through, like, basically, some of the top 32 prospects in the first round, which you can check out on youtube.com/ESPN show. We also talked NBA, NHL playoffs as well.
So going down the Aaron Rodgers.
Well, that's so interesting. Well, Aaron Rodgers, when we got the breaking news, Schefter initially got the terms of the trade wrong, so we got them wrong on ESPN. But he went to Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, to Bradley's Jets. It's going to be a really interesting year. I can't help but root for him, though. Still.
I know, I could tell. I could tell by your Instagram. It's like, I don't know, Dawson's Creek.
All right, enough.
Remember this guy?
Yeah. Matt Binder, hello.
Hello, everybody. How you doing?
What's happening on Doomed and Scam Economy, my friend?
On Doomed, we got a wonderful episode with Angelo Carusone of Media Matters. We broke down everything going on with Tucker Carlson, what it means for him, for Fox News. It was, I think, one of the best episodes of Doomed yet. So definitely go check that out at youtube.com/MattBinder. And it's going up today at doomedcast.com, which also means Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And for Scam Economy, new episode of Scam Economy coming out very shortly. I know it's been a week or two, but I've been doing a bunch of podcast episodes this week, such as Dan from the Web's Power Report, Western Kabuki, that's the Great Juniper of Twitter's podcast. And I'm going to be doing Tech Won't Save Us this week as well. It's been a busy week for me because, Elon Musk.
Yeah. We will talk a bit about that and how you were singled out as a verified under 1 million follower person. That's how you understand that you are truly a bee in the bonnet of the richest man on the face of the earth, or one of the three, I guess. How does that feel to be singled out by him, so he can just troll you and give you a blue check?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, let me tell you, if 16-year-old super duper punk rock Matt Binder could see me now, I mean,
I love it. I love it. You really are you're relentless in the best way. So, all right, we're going to head into the fun half. No Brandon today. He is traveling. So, just us three, the two Matts and me. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. Bye-bye.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
And back.
We are back. We are back. It is the fun half, everybody. We've called into the phones. We'll be reading your IMs, taking some calls. Let's read some IMs, and we'll do a very fun clip we have here. J-Man Raps, Ilhan Omar was on Alex Wagner last night, and it was a clinic in disgraceful gaslighting, claiming that, we need to support Biden because of fighting fascism. Anyway, 709 area code. Anyway, I mean, guys, Biden's the nominee. Like, I don't know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, I think it's the Democrats should show more openness to sorts of primaries, but at the same time, like if Bernie didn't, the decision has been made to just not fight this. Yeah, exactly. Bernie didn't actually primary Obama in 2012 either. When it, I think he hinted at it in a way that I'm defensive of, but like. I do think like this stuff is sort of written.
Yeah.
I think ultimately like the left does need to get to a position where they're willing to differentiate themselves, and like I think Bernie, like we talked about this on Left Reckoning. I think Bernie has been pretty like telegraphing that this is the role he's taken, even from like the endorsement of Biden back in 2020.
Yeah.
But I do think like it would have been nice to have a news cycle out of it. Like instead of Bernie immediately saying, because then that message is just unity, and like to be honest, I'm not super interested in that message because I think that goes one way. I would have been nice to like hem and haw a little bit, and then try to at least get something out of it.
This is how I felt about the crowning of Hakeem Jeffries as the new leader in the House for the Democrats. Like that is the critique, I guess, of maybe the progressives of not. They can have their intentions behind the scenes of supporting the nominee.
Well, like I think it's silly to call it gaslighting. It's party politics.
Yeah.
And like if like I do think like.
And I think Bernie's kind of somewhat happy with how Biden had included him in like the original Build Back Better negotiations and things. It didn't end up the way we wanted, but it seems like progressives are okay with how he's approached them.
It's not
in negotiations.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think like it's not going to. I mean, Bernie's never been like this sort of bomb thrower anyway that like sort of maybe loyalist Democrats thought he was. And I think like that's maybe to his detriment ultimately. Like I think maybe there was an opportunity to push more people to the Democratic Socialists or something like that. But he didn't do that. And I do think it's like it's okay to be disappointed, but like also I don't think we should like psychologize it as like gaslighting or like this is an interpersonal tag. Like this is politics. It sucks, and things do need to change. And we do need this like new crop of DSA and more, I guess, like non-conflict averse Democrats. Like, but I don't know. I guess it's hard for me to be super upset about this, even though like the long-term thing is I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't. We haven't done a little bit more to differentiate ourselves, but I don't think this is like much of an opportunity for that.
Yeah. Matt writes
I think people also have to think
ahead.
about the in terms of what he could do. He could have been also massively unpopular if he didn't end up and ended up backfiring, I think, especially being that there wasn't there was, I should say, this threat of Trump that I do think that most mainstream America is really cares the most. I mean, look at Fetterman.
Yeah.
I keep using Fetterman as the perfect example of a guy who has the good politics, but realizes that in order to get the mass numbers of Democrats behind him in a primary and in the general, he needed to also play that game of being front and center anti-Trump during that 2020 post-election time period.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily like, I don't agree that like they need to do that. But I think like I'm not disappointed that they're not doing it.
Yeah, right. Space Cat Jones, funny anecdote. The video game No Man's Sky gives you the ability to oversee a settlement, a village, basically. You have to make decisions and resolve disputes and whatnot. Those decisions affect the productivity and happiness of the settlement's inhabitants. I've been approaching all these decisions from a socialist standpoint, and so far that has proven the way to increase the quality of my settlement. And so now I keep wondering if the game is secretly teaching the player base about dialectical politics. That's funny.
Which game was that?
A No Man's Sky.
Oh, I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Frank Blunts. I'm sure Fox will replace Tucker, but is anyone as skilled a propagandist? Waters is really stupid, and like all other Fox personalities, is just a parrot. Tucker could create the propaganda. Seems like Fox lost their star QB headed into the election.
What kind of, do we think he's like a Tom Brady, or do we think he's like I don't know, like a Matt Ryan? Like I think people overstate just like I think because he was like the big grand poobah during this like Trump little era here, because Bill O'Reilly got out of the paint and Rush Limbaugh's dead. But like I don't think he's as talented as either of those guys.
Matt Ryan's a good actually kind of example there, because he was a quarterback of the Kyle Shanahan system when he won MVP, and I think that the Fox machine, aka the system's a little bit more of what makes the man as opposed to the other way around. NJ Manman, damn, Tucker sucks without his team of Stormfront online posters to write for him. Yeah, and when he has to be like a coward and can't say actually anything about Fox. Floyd the Barber, Binder's Mashable article about Twitter Blue was cited in a Ringer article by Justin Charity. Thought that was pretty cool. Look at that, Binder.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't see that one. Cool. Emma's world in my world. Come on.
The Ringer, I feel like that's even more Matt's territory
Paper
here.
record, yeah.
There you go. It's mostly basketball website. All right, let's do this old clip here. So now that we've been talking about Steven Crowder a little bit on this program, the fact that he's getting a divorce, we wouldn't care about that if he didn't publicize it on his show, try to monetize it.
If he didn't devote the A block to it.
Yeah, within the context of a feud with Candace Owens, while also telling her, don't look any further into the details behind the divorce, which you might have been kind of hinting at going after me about some months prior, because I will be litigious. Don't you dare look any further. She was definitely only blackmailing me about the divorce, guys, not the details of the divorce.
And I would like to open up the possibility a little bit, because I think we all, what we suspected that Owens was hinting at is one thing. But there's another thing that she said, which is that he sent me a flirty text, which is like, if Steven Crowder's been getting a little bit spicy in the DMs post breakup, that could also be a kind of damaging thing. So it'd be.
I would guess he's not on the up and up on that front.
I'm just saying, like, yeah, I'll just put a little like 10% possibility on that being the actual thing, but.
Yeah, details still coming out, but it's helpful kind of just to see where Steven Crowder has come from. So in the wake of this, people were posting an old article that he wrote for Fox News in 2017 about why waiting to have sex until you get married is the key to a long-lasting marriage. He was also making this case on Greg Gutfeld's show Red Eye back in 2015. This was a show that aired in the dead of night on Fox News. I think you could call it the graveyard shift with Greg. That might have been a little bit more catchy. You got the alliteration, but whatever. And Crowder, right-wing comedian, as he branded himself, came on to debate then up-and-coming left-wing comedian, or liberal comedian Amy Schumer. And
what year is this from again?
2015. I think.
I thought Schumer had already like sort of ascended beyond this stratosphere at that point, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I mean, I could have the date wrong. Again, Bradley's out, so I was doing a bunch of different things, but it's old. That's all you really need to know. And she lands some blows on Crowder here. It's pretty fun. Let's watch the first part of this here.
It helps form a bond stronger than something really strong. I speak not of polydent, but of abstinence. At least according to a young man named Steven Crowder, who argues in his latest column that abstinence is kind of awesome. Crowder muses on why abstinence remains a punchline despite offering plenty of benefits to being friends without benefits. Forget that abstinence leads to approximately 0 STDs or studies that show at least in successful marriages. It's the unbeatable bond of trust that's the real prize. Yes, says Crowder, there's no more worrying about your significant other cheating on you because partners can be supremely confident in their respective self-control, unlike the inventors of the new South American butt dance.
All right, I don't understand this.
Little titillation here.
Yeah.
There's also racist.
I do appreciate you pulling up those reaction shots specifically for the butt dance, man.
That'll put me off sex forever. Steve, here's my question. It's admirable. When do you stop? When do you stop with the abstinence? How will you know it's time?
Well, once you have a ring on your finger, obviously. The only way to know for sure is once you're married. And of course, people know I'm a Christian. This column is not at all pushing faith in anybody. It's just talking about the actual benefits. If you really want to argue for abstinence, you can stop the argument and be abstinent, don't get sick and die.
Yeah.
But, I can say from personal experience that it does build a bond of trust. Constantly here.
I just like to stay, I don't want to speak for anybody else here, but I was not abstinent. I'm not married, and I'm not also a virgin. Still alive, and no major health problems.
Same here. I just gotta say. But I do have to wear a scarlet A on my chest. I have it tattooed, but I hide it well with makeup on the program. That was the one thing, I punished myself for it. As a good wasp should.
There's benefits
also,
to that sort of.
I know Crowder played a cat, like he voiced the role for a character on Arthur, but he looks honestly like a character from Arthur come to life in this clip here. The style he's got, the hair.
Yeah. Yeah, he is personifying overgrown child here.
I mean, he seems like 15.
Yes.
Women, how often do you hear, well, don't you trust me? It's like, no, you slept with me on the first date. So of course I don't trust you.
It's that old thing, like I wouldn't join a club that would let me into that club.
Right.
It's, she's going to sleep with me, then she'll sleep
Usually
with
because I'm
anybody.
Canadian, they won't let me in.
Yeah.
Except for Canadian Club Ginger Ale.
Amy, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, but also, if I sleep with a guy on the first date, usually if a guy holds my hand, he's going to wind up. So here's the thing. I don't think that women should use sex as a bargaining chip, and a lot of them do. If I want to sleep with someone, I do it, and I am a monogamous slut. Can I say that on air?
I think you can. That's not what we're worried about.
But what I'm saying is, I have a higher risk of disease. I also have a much higher risk of fun.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying to my point by saying that, you don't think it should be used as a bargaining tool.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as, the kind of point of the column is that abstinence is the one taboo issue regarding sex. I mean, it's like, oh, be a dirty stand-up comic. You're cracking new ground there, Copernicus. But once you talk about abstinence, everyone all of a sudden, they put you, like right now, we have to talk about it. Because who is this kid who's talking about abstinence who,
Well, it's who's this kid who's, 23. You don't know who you're going to be sexually yet. So to talk about it with such authority and arrogance.
I don't know who I'm going to be what?
You don't know who you're going to be sexually yet. You're going to be into really weird things in about a decade.
Oh, I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
Trust me. And the thing is, there should be no confidence. You slip by the dirty comedian thing, but honestly, you call yourself a comedian, but you don't do it that much. Like, I go fishing a couple times a year, but I don't introduce myself on TV as a fisherman. Wow.
It's really personal for a concept about abstinence.
Pause it. All right. First of all, I'm going to come clean here. This is like a great moment for me because I've always liked Amy Schumer, and the alt-right backlash against her has been over the top. Like every guy that wants to seem cool is like, I don't find her that hot, I don't find her that funny, she steals all these jokes. I don't know if that's true, but I know that in that moment, she nailed him because that's the reality. Crowder, you're not a comedian. You're sitting next to one who actually is.
The only thing he's gotten close to a joke is like the Dennis Miller-esque Copernicus line.
Yes. And she was like, what?
Yeah, and it's funny because I thought she was reacting to the Copernicus thing, but her reaction was even more poignant, which is like, you're a comedian?
Yeah, right. And she goes, I've gone fishing. I don't call myself a fisherman. It's amazing. All right, let's go back 15 seconds or even 30 just so we can relive that again.
You don't know who you're going to be sexually yet. You're going to be into really weird things in about
That's
a decade.
interesting.
Oh, I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
Trust me. And the thing is, there should be no confidence. You slip by the dirty comedian thing, but honestly, you call yourself a comedian, but you don't do it that much. Like, I go fishing a couple times a year, but I don't introduce myself on TV as a fisherman. Wow.
This is not really personal for a concept about abstinence. I'm saying the whole point is that some can get up on stage, we even talk about it in the column, and talk about anything dirty that they want. But the second you mention abstinence, people, they pucker with discomfort, like, oh no, we can't talk about this, and you're vilified as judgmental. Statistically, it's the healthiest thing to do. It is conducive towards a better marriage by a 25% spread, both physically.
It only takes that one person, though, and there is no there's no contract that the person's not going to cheat on you because they're abstinent. She could
There
fall
is
in
no
love with
contract.
somebody
Well, actually,
else.
there is a contract. That's what a marriage
She
is.
could
Well,
it's a contract that more than 60% of people break.
No, actually, that's not true. Actually, if you even look at the new U.S. Census Bureau statistics, more than 70% of first-time marriages last.
Okay, but then the guy goes off and sleeps with a young boy.
Well,
good. You guys stayed married, but then there's infidelity.
Well, once you bring out the statistics that guys are running around rampantly sleeping with young boys.
First of all, I'm not a boy. I know I have characteristics as such.
All I'm saying is yes, you're right. Of course, it is way safer to not have sex, but yeah, but if you have sex with one person, maybe they've had sex with one person. It only takes that one. I've probably had sex with, I don't know, a baker's 2 dozen, you know, and I'm fine.
Mike Baker? Sex with Mike Baker? He is happily married. Thus proving your point.
He's hot. All I'm saying is not cheating with a contract.
You're abstinent, but not by choice.
No.
All right, well, we can pause it now because then these weirdos weigh in for some reason. But she got a vibe from him. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, a little bit interesting little...
Why did she go there to the boys thing? Yeah. Whatever.
I mean, it's very fascinating that because, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. Schumer is way more relatable there. And,
yeah.
Like, I come from, like, fairly religious people in North Dakota. Steven Crowder shit, like, that is wildly repressed.
Right.
And lame. And, like, oh, man.
And notice how it's just the same shit every time with conservatives. No one's going to let you talk about this. No one wants you to talk about this. No one wants to talk about abstinence.
No, everyone thinks it's weird.
Yeah,
it's dumb.
Right. The reason that, like, theocratic views about what marriage should be aren't said that much and people don't like to talk about it is because your ideas are outdated and they suck. But she had him pegged pretty quickly. This continues. We'll skip over, go to like 512. Yeah. Because I don't know who these folks are, but they kind of keep going at it back and forth for a little bit longer.
Sure, if you want a long-standing relationship.
They
I
have
do
great
put
abs,
that
though.
top
Yes.
tip in
Yeah.
my book, yeah.
That's the thing, like lack of abstinence is directly linked to really good abs. That's the problem.
That is a problem.
Wordplay.
I've got a beer gut.
But I have to say,
right
my
here.
last 3 relationships, which each lasted between 2 to 5 years, we slept with each other almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I knew that I wanted to be with them, you know?
Except
But
that
why'd you kill them?
Except at the 5-year mark.
Yeah, but so what?
How long
At
you
least I
last, boy?
figured it out, and I didn't get married and spend my life with somebody that I hate.
But statistically,
And I had a great
unrealistic.
UN.
Statistically, that's wrong. I mean, if you want to disregard stats, in
What-
fact, then you can
statistically,
say-
what's wrong?
Statistically, 87% of people who wait until they're married are happier, and 52% aren't. And the same thing.
Here's a stat. Steven Crowder, 1 divorce.
Yep. I mean, and then I love how he relies on these statistics about marriage and like, I mean, that are fairly dubious in and of themselves that we now know in the year 2023 that he is defied personally, at least, or he's not in that same, safe category that he's assigning to it.
You can look at the social organization of sexuality. These are not
How do you have
Christian-funded
statistics
studies.
on people's happiness?
You tell them, are you happy?
Are
you
they-
emotionally
they're at church
satisfied?
smiling?
No, you can say, are you emotionally satisfied in your marriage? Yes, no. By 25% spread, both spouses who are virgins, yes. Are you sexually satisfied in your marriage? Yes. Is it difficult for you to achieve an orgasm?
Why?
Just one note on that, like those numbers, like people, you can lies, damn lies, and statistics. Is that the Mark Twain thing? Like, I would just say that folks who are more disposed to, say, follow their parents' wishes that they stay celibate towards marriage are also more likely to report they're like happy and satisfied with their lives to a pollster because they're not set up
honest.
to question
Yes.
that shit.
Well, I mean, this is Crowder in and of it, it's repression. I mean, that is like fundamental to this worldview is not being really in touch, honestly, with how you feel and pushing those feelings aside through strict dogma. And that's the fundamentalism.
But people have to be honest
It's
about
all
their
the sources
emotions.
are listed in the column. Every single source listed. These are things that have been used by the Kinsey Institute.
What
I'm
I'm
not
saying
following
is,
that.
who cares what they said? A lot of people say they have happy marriages, even in therapy, when they're miserable.
So the 25-point spread doesn't matter because only the people who would be lying would be the people who are abstinent.
I just don't know any happily married people.
Speaking of statistics,
I don't.
let's get back to my plight.
What?
Statistically, 100% of these women are not calling me back.
That is true.
Nobody's reading my...
Yeah, I think that's good. But yeah, that's I found that to be kind of prescient by her, and he might want to reevaluate his position on it. But he, in his divorce announcement / monetization of his feud with Candace Owens situation, he said the only mistake that he made was that he picked wrong. Not,
And he had like a 70 to 30% chance too.
I know. He went with the numbers and he just picked wrong.
It's a spread. You got a 25% spread there, and you still pick wrong.
I mean, it's that sounds inaccurate, being that he's the one who was claiming he doesn't want a divorce. The more accurate statement is that she picked wrong. I mean.
Yes,
she's the one who's leaving his ass.
I know, but he picked wrong because if he picked right, she would stay with him despite her not loving him anymore. That's what would really, people have core values in their relationships and in their marriage. That's a core value, is for him, despite how despicable and horrible and misogynistic and homophobic and repressed and messed up he is, you gotta stick with me through it, despite my complete inability to have self-reflection or growth. That's what he wants in a marriage. That's what he values. What is this here? Matt's pulled up some
This is
meme.
a meme shared to me by Anonymous1234.
Thank you, Anonymous1234.
And it says, the myth of consensual divorce. And it's the state of Texas saying, I consent. And there's a woman saying, I consent. And it's Steven Crowder saying, I don't. And the bottom says, isn't there somebody you forgot to ask?
Yeah. So that is his, manosphere stuff. I mean, look. Right-wingers have been against no-fault divorce for decades. It's because they're against sexual liberation of
John
women.
Milton, prior to writing Paradise Lost in 1670 or wherever, was called a libertine because he thought that we should have no-fault divorce if people
Really?
didn't. Yeah, exactly.
Well, so it's even way, 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 way longer.
This is 17th century conservatism that Steven Crowder is putting on display here.
We can go back to Henry VIII, I guess, although that's a little bit more in his wheelhouse. Or the man's decision, but it's just amazing to see how poorly that's aged for Steven Crowder, Matt Binder.
I would want to know, when did Steven Crowder decide to make this turn into being a comedian? Because there was no attempt made there. It was just him being some weird little religious weirdo. What?
A little nerd, yeah.
Yeah, when did he decide did Amy Schumer own him so bad that he was like, I think I want to do comedy. That was good.
Yeah. I want to be like that. Binder, your mic's kind of crackling a little, and also we're saying we got some IMs saying that it's hard to hear the clip through the phones and that the first half is still running. So just a heads up there.
Oh, gotcha. Through the phones, okay.
Okay. So we're gonna fix that. Maybe Matt.
Better, or is my still crackling?
Better.
It's better? Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Perfect. All right, let's take a call. But anyway, I enjoyed that a lot.
And the important thing is, kids, have sex before marriage.
Yes. Safe sex, but sex before marriage. Calling from a 563 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Wayne from Iowa.
Wayne from Iowa. What's on your mind?
Yeah, last week on Thursday, Emma, you were very dismissive of my state's culture.
Okay.
Bringing up child labor, of course.
And that's your culture?
Oh, right. I
Yeah,
forgot.
of course.
I forgot about that. Yes, that's a deeply held cultural belief.
Yeah, I work at a child care center, actually, and we're really excited about it here. I mean, we're going to be able to train them for 12 years, and then by the time they're out, we can bring them right into the workforce.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's hard for me to keep track at this point, but what's going on in Iowa exactly right now when it comes to child labor legislation?
They lowered the age. I want to say it's down to 14, and it's 16 for a majority of jobs now.
Gotcha. Wow. And
I believe they've loosened checks with regards to, say, parental consent, which might show, for instance, an undocumented child being exploited. So you might not want to. It's better not to test. Don't test. Better not to know.
Yeah, Iowa's just a sneaky little hellhole right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few friends from Des Moines, and like the brain drain from Iowa seems very similar to North Dakota. Like people, particularly if you have any sort of like say LGBT identity, you're looking out of state.
Us gays here are just having a great time. But I wanted to talk about Biden's campaign, and he hired a guy named Quentin Folks who ran he was a campaign manager for Raphael Warnock's campaign.
Gotcha.
And I saw it on ABC News, because that was where I saw it first when I woke up when he announced. And I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts were getting the campaign manager from Raphael Warnock. He barely won that campaign, and it was against Herschel Walker.
Right, exactly.
I just don't know that that's the best approach. I mean, not a lot of what Biden does is the best approach, but still.
I agree with you. I agree. All right, well, I appreciate the call. Thank you for drawing our attention to that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Spacco, Matt's Doomed episode with Angelo Curasong was great. During the after show, I talked about how my strategy of cutting into Fox's News. I think I am cut off there, Spacco. Tammy, maybe if Steven Crowder married a woman who wasn't a virgin and knew her body and what she liked sexually, she wouldn't have left him after hitting her prime sex years. I mean, you're just saying it, Tammy, not me. Bingo Dango, Crowder's last little comeback. Of course, people would be way more likely to lie about being happy in a broken marriage than the opposite. What a dumbass. People aren't going to lie and say their marriage sucks when they are actually happy with it. That doesn't happen or make sense.
I like that he was still doing like one of the major bullshitters. Like watch Jose Nada J's thing on Crowder on election night. Just a complete liar, but always saying, yeah, well, you put the links, all the links so you can check it all yourself in the description. That's just a rhetorical, like just a compendium of bullshit that he doesn't actually expect people to follow through on.
Star Fox, happy Thursday, Emma and Matt. I know, close. I caught myself, I think.
No, you did not.
Damn it. One of our best and brightest new members on the Discord, Crossy Noel, discovered the link that the link to Google at the bottom of the MR site leads to a dead link, so it should be switched to go to the Google Play Store for the app. If you'd like to point out more things wrong with the show or just want to hang out, join the Majority Report Discord today. Love you all, left is best. Thank you.
If you want to do volunteer IT for us.
Yes. Honestly, we'd take it. Jillian in Michigan, GOP against parental consent suddenly. I know. J-Man Raps, you guys are accepting the limits of the capitalist DC elites. I don't care what the F they think. Biden is polling at 25% with young voters. I'm just trying to be realistic. You know, that's
like I think it'd be nice, but like what do you support Marianne Williamson? I'm sorry, I don't think Marianne Williamson even ideologically is as interesting as Bernie was himself. And like what is there? If there was if the Teamsters said we're running a guy, I'd fucking support him. Mm-hmm. Or if some other but like this sort of thing where we're even like Bobby Kennedy, like despite the anti-vax stuff, he's still saying like we're going to redeem the soul of the Democratic Party, and that was the stuff that wasn't really persuasive from Bernie.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I mean, what should Bernie do? Say, should he run again? Is that really like what we're holding our hopes on? Do we think that would deliver? Like, I don't know.
I don't think
very misogynistic of you, Matt. You said you would not support Marianne, but if the Teamsters said they were running a guy, you would.
I support. I think they should debate. Well, okay, some Teamsters, anybody, yeah, fair enough. But yeah, I just think and I think there should be debates, and I think there should be an actual open primary, and I think you know, if you had a better culture of democracy, maybe you would have better candidates than like RFK being the third. But like, I don't know. Like, it's Bernie. This was always Bernie's thing, and there is a limitation to it. there are good things about it. It's good when he pulls Starbucks in front of Congress. It's not going to get us to where we're ultimately trying to go, and neither would him running again.
Yeah, right. It's an overemphasis on electoralism, my friend. Never going to give you up.
I think Carl Bashir had the best take, where someone was like,
Behar.
Bernie Bernie endorsing Biden means that Bernie is officially done with running. And Carl Bashir's tweets that it means no such thing. Bernie's just sitting out the third quarter, icing up for the fourth. Bernie 2028, baby.
Right.
Never going to give you up says, I think this version of Steven Crowder just wants to tell you how I feel, hoping you will understand. The Tuxter, holy shit, watching Amy Schumer eviscerate Crowder is awesome. Never saw this before. Yeah, it's fun. You want to do this Dwayne Wade thing, Matt?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Dwayne Wade, NBA legend, Miami legend, won 2 championships with the Heat, has a trans daughter, and he and his partner, Gabrielle Union, have been so supportive and vocally speaking out on trans issues that it's just like, it's so encouraging, specifically in the space of sports, given how Wade is a Hall of Famer, and how they've just essentially chosen to be real allies in such a public way.
Yeah.
In such like a masculine heteronormative space like sports. I can't tell you how impactful this kind of stuff is.
They perfectly model what being a parent is in 2023 in my understanding. Like with regards to their trans child Zaya, she understood what's so interesting about her story is that it is typical of all these trans experiences, and that's why the right literally cannot actually compute, and they have to deny that this is the reality, which is that these children often know very, very early on, in the case of Zaya at 3 years old, that there's some misalignment with regards to gender. And so they've gone through this entire process of like social transition and stuff like that. And the Wade and Union have been perfectly supportive of that. And to the point where even like, I believe like Wade's had to stand up to his ex-wife, who is not supportive of that, who is maybe following the DeSantis model of these things. But like, it's exactly what, if you were looking for, what do I do? I'm not prepared by American culture to deal with having a trans child. And like, there is a model there.
Yeah, right.
Right. And people act like Jordan Peterson, like, what's the rules? Everything. No, actually, it's not that hard.
Yes.
It's like you trust your child and then you make fucking lunch for them.
Right, exactly. And I meant to say 3-time NBA champion. So thank you, NYC Driver, for correcting me on that. But yeah, I mean, like it's a breath of fresh air. But with all that said, as I said, legend in Miami, and he, though, recently revealed in this interview with Rachel Nichols on Headliners, which is a Showtime sports show, that he's left Florida because he doesn't feel comfortable raising his trans daughter there.
What do you have to say to some of those state legislators who maybe have your jersey in their closets, who came and brought their kids to your game to cheer for you?
Well, I think that's another reason why I don't live in this state. A lot of people don't know that. I have to make decisions for my family, not just personal individual decisions. I mean, obviously the taxes is great. Having Wade County is great, but my family would not be accepted or feel comfortable there. So that's one of the reasons why I don't live there.
I mean, that news set off a lot of reactions because Wade has recently purchased a stake in the Utah Jazz, so people are like, "Whoa, you live in Utah," but he lives in Los Angeles.
Yeah, there's a couple things to that. One, he lives in LA. Two, Utah Jazz as a team has made statements against this sort of thing, like, for instance, one to save the All-Star game. And also, like, I would say, like, Spencer Cox is a fucking worm who has rolled over to the House GOP there. He's a Republican governor of Utah. But he, like, initially, like, stood up to
vetoed it.
Like, it vetoed it.
The sports ban, because it was targeting 2 trans kids in the state.
Yeah, and
2.
like, ultimately, like, it's the same thing with Nome and Burgum in the Dakotas. Like, to the extent that you'll get a Republican that will try to tamp the brakes on the anti-trans stuff, they get bowled over eventually because the waves keep crashing. But like, DeSantis is a different type of thing, I think, entirely. absolutely. And if I had a trans kid, I had the means that Dwayne Wade has and Gabrielle Union has, I would absolutely live in LA too.
Well, that's, I think, the lesson here is that they have the ability to do this, right? And I think everyone with means who's a good parent would make this choice. But the thing is that there are going to be hundreds of thousands of trans kids at this point. I would guess, since like now half the country is going to be living under anti-trans religious dogma as law, that they're not going to have the same luxury. Like the Vice followed 3 Texas families with trans kids and their fears of living in the state and attempts to leave it. And this is going to be the story that we see more and more and more.
And it's such a contrast. Like I just think of the 2 neighbors to my home state, North Dakota. Montana, you have this whole Zoe Zephyr thing going on in the House Freedom Caucus. And in Minnesota, they're passing legislation to protect trans care and also like folks who might travel to their state for that. Like, it's really a wild polarity we got on this issue, but like we should be able to win this. Like this is like, I think like Dwayne Wade and Matt Walsh are like physical embodiments of how strong their arguments are. Like there is no debate about this. There's no intramural debate, as Matt Taibbi like to call it. Like this stuff is, there are facts, and which is that there are trans people that exist and we should help them, seek healthcare, and not even help them. We should provide it for them. And it's the same thing with abortion. Like these things should be covered by the government, and like it shouldn't. And that's why the Republicans like are kind of like attacking this, because the implicit message, when you strip all the identity stuff out of it, is that people cannot be empowered to pursue their own healthcare, and they should be.
Medical freedom, baby. Let's do this story in San Francisco now. So there's this former San Francisco fire commissioner who has accused a homeless person of attacking him. And that case was playing itself out in court. But there has been new evidence, very important evidence, in this case of the former San Francisco fire commissioner, Don Carmagiani. Carmagiani, it's some Italian last name.
Yeah, dickhead.
Asshole guy who, he said initially that he was assaulted outside of his mother's home by a homeless person named Garrett Dottie. Now, the attorney for Dottie has found a disturbing pattern of police reports and videos connected with it of a man fitting Don Carmagiani's description. And there is video here. I'm just going to warn you, it's a little disturbing. Going around spraying bear mace on at least 8 homeless people in the area. And this video footage has been uncovered. We're going to show it briefly. This is just one of the examples that they have of a man fitting his description going around and bum rushing homeless people and spraying them in the face with
assaulting them with like possibly
bear mace.
I don't know, deadly, if you could get that charge, but like you can really
if you inhale it like this.
Exactly. Yeah. Playing it now. Just goes up and unloads right in the guy's face. Yeah, absolutely, that could kill somebody.
Yep. So there's more footage of that kind, but here's the attorney for Dottie, who is the homeless person who is being accused here, essentially laying out what they found in their defense of the homeless person.
The district attorney and the police have now reason to believe that Mr. Carmagiani was involved in eight separate acts of violence. These 8 separate acts of violence were perpetrated against people who are homeless. the district attorney and the police gave us, the defense, yesterday, these police reports because they believe these acts are related to Mr. Carmignani. I have reviewed these police reports. They date back to November of 2021. The most recent one is January of 2023. In all of them, the victims are not housed. The victims are either asleep in their tents, sitting on a bench, minding their own business. And in all of them, this man, who is described as 6 feet, 6'1", 280, 300 pounds, gray hair, brown hair, very similar, matching what Mr. Carmignani looks like, right? So these incidents are being reported over the last 2 years, and fortunately, one of them was caught on video. It shows a man asleep.
Yeah, we got it. So she describes it there. But I mean, I'm sure that Carmignani was radicalized by media coverage of the dangers of homeless people on our streets, as he's the danger, going up and assaulting them because of pure hatred in his heart.
I mean, this is what underlies in the sort of motive force behind all of this sort of supposedly we're just trying to do the best thing with regards to homeless. Like this is what you own, I think, when you decide to take a tact on this that isn't like ultimately entirely empathetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The whole discourse surrounding this before this reveal reminds me so much of something that just happened just a couple of weeks ago with Bob Lee.
Bob Lee, right.
The Cash App founder who got killed by, turns out, a fellow tech executive founder that he knew.
But they were initially blaming that on crime in
the
San
homeless
Francisco.
people, right? Crime, yep. And here we have another case where, oh look, this guy, in this case, a chief firefighter or whatever, got beat up by a homeless individual, crime running rampant. And then you find out the guy was probably defending himself from one of these attacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As somebody who was just on a grand jury, that's the way I would rule that. I would say he's lucky he got off with like less than that, because you're doing that to people. You don't know, like homeless people get a lot of abuse, and they often have ways to defend themselves. And like honestly, good luck, like Godspeed defending yourself against this shit, because all these people have it coming, whatever comes to them.
Right, and it just is a window into the mindset of this kind of guy. They're just bullies, and they're looking for justification about like vagrants so that they can beat up on somebody that is just mostly defenseless. I mean, as Matt said, they do have the ability to defend themselves, but they are at the lowest point and at the most vulnerable point that they could be in society. They are without a home. They are economically as insecure as possible. And for freaks like this, that elicits anger in them. Not empathy, but anger for being a victim of society because this guy, Carmignani, feels that he's on top. That's like the worst of humanity right there in front of you. And these are the true menaces to society, not the people who are victims of our society. Really is an incredible story, but as validating as we can find about like some of the crime discourse in this country.
Yeah, thank God he was a firefighter, not a police commissioner. Otherwise, the police probably wouldn't have been so forthcoming about this.
Exactly. This is an instance in which the firefighter cop rivalry benefited us.
Rare firefighter L to cops.
Yes, I mean. Like, I watch that NYPD FDNY hockey game sometimes that they play at Madison Square Garden annually. I'm always rooting for the firefighters, but damn, there's some bad guys there too. All right, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from a 614 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Dylan from Australia. How you doing?
Hello?
Dylan, you're going to have to
Dylan,
speak up, buddy.
yeah. Are you on a speaker?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, God, I'm sorry. It's actually 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry. There you go. Can you hear me?
Dylan, this is rough audio here.
Yeah, Dylan, this audio
it's
is
all
okay for
muffled.
left reckoning, but I don't know, buddy. Might need to...
What?
Dylan?
Better. Is this working? Third time, final time. Is this working?
Not really, but you got a quick point?
Yeah, I was just this thing with Steven Crowder, right? Like, so I get if you're a member of the community and you want to go, maybe this guy's been seen at a bar or whatever and he's wandering around and he's dressing up in dresses and stuff when he's on his show, and members of his staff and stuff come out and they're like, we don't like him because of that, because they're bigots in their heart and they've got nothing but hate and stuff. But the predisposition amongst people who are like, there's nobody who is on his side who you're winning over by like bringing him down by like insinuating bad things about his marriage. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't, in my opinion, like I don't know. There's just, I think that there can be like an ugly tendency amongst people to kind of like, I don't want to like be singing for this guy. Like yesterday on his Twitter, he's like, look at the things with the Barbies and they're supporting Down syndrome. Like, this is a horrible person. And if he wants to have a bunch of his people turn on him because of Candace Owens, you know, saying all of this hateful stuff, you know, he's not a person who does not he deserves that as an individual on a personal level.
Dylan,
But
it's a little hard to hear
Sorry,
you.
Dylan, we got
gotta jump. I'm sorry, but
Yeah, no, I
he
get
does
it.
deserve a lot of shit. Oh, Dylan hung up. All right, we'll take another call really quickly. Calling from a 502 area code. 502. Who's this?
This is Nico from San Francisco.
Nico from San Francisco. What's on your mind? Have any thoughts about that that clip we just played?
Yeah, I'm glad you guys brought it up. I was going to call out real quick that on the phones, I couldn't hear any of the clips today. So I'm not sure exactly what was said in the clip, but
gotcha.
Definitely for a little bit of extra context on the firefighter guy. When he was actually attacked, that was only 2 days after Bob Lee was killed. So I think that actually definitely contributed to that kind of fever pitch of anti-homeless rhetoric around here. And the other thing on that note is that I think SFPD is, I might have mentioned this before when I called in about the Bob Lee killing, but they're pretty known for being hands-off, to say the least. So I think this type of, vigilantism, which I think is kind of what this firefighter guy thought he was doing. Like, I've heard the justification for why he was assaulting these homeless people was that they were hanging out near his mom's house and she was uncomfortable or something like that.
Right, yeah.
So I think, as long as there's no kind of structural solution for homelessness or crime in SF, this is only going to get worse. Like, you're going to see more people doing this kind of thing. And if you look at the way that people talk about it online in some of the, I guess, more conservative tech bro-y communities, they all still support this firefighter even after all of this has come out.
Nico,
so I don't imagine this is going to get better.
I was just reminded that of the example, and we played this on the show a few months ago. The business owner who sprayed that homeless woman with a hose.
Right.
That was also San Francisco. Like, this is this entitlement from a certain class of person that this urban center should be a fun playground for me, and I don't want to have to see anybody suffering, because cities are not places to live. They're for bridge and tunnelers to come in and have fun and see a show and not have, their experience ruined by humanity not being, as neat and tidy.
Yeah, definitely. That wasn't even originally why I was calling, but I'm glad that you guys talked about it. I did want to bring up one more thing that's a little bit more outside the U.S. focused. I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago when some guy in Venezuela declared himself president, and everyone in the U.S. supported it.
Yeah.
Couldn't
Guaido. Yeah. And
Guaido.
And Biden doing a pro-democracy summit with him.
Yeah. Well, he was just deported from Colombia after trying to literally sneak into the country to make a bunch of noise at a summit that's being held between the Colombian and Venezuelan governments. And I think it's interesting just because there's definitely been kind of a posture shift, I think, from the U.S. side as far as how they handle Venezuela and like Latin America in general. In terms of, obviously during the Trump administration, it kind of looked like we were going back to the kind of Operation Condor style coups in Bolivia. In Venezuela, obviously, was attempted. But it kind of looks like these days, I don't know if it's the Biden administration or if there's been a more general realization that the U.S. doesn't have the power to exert that type of control anymore. But it looks like Biden's administration is taking a much more conciliatory angle and starting to, I don't want to say normalize, but at least open up relations with Venezuela again.
Right. Appreciate
yeah, I mean,
it,
that's my interpretation too, even though it's kind of a hopeful one that I wouldn't normally trust. But it does seem like we just don't think we have the juice anymore to, say, install Guaido.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, we'll have to give it a couple more terms, I think, and see if any other administrations treat it differently. But I'm really hoping that, Latin American countries get the chance to kind of avoid that type of interference.
Not to be too conspiratorial, Nico, but it's also Maduro has been softening his stance on like Western or, capitalist encroachment on like their oil reserves too. So that might contribute to softening of any U.S. stances. But
yeah, I could definitely see that.
Hey, free trade, baby.
Yep. As long as the sanctions, stop crushing the Venezuelan people for the interim, I'm okay with it. Have a good one,
I think
dude.
that's the goal. Thanks.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Ryan and Callie, wait, what? There's an FDNY NYPD annual hockey game at Madison Square Garden. Saints preserve us. I can smell the Irish from here in California. Yep, there is. And Staten Island raises itself from the water for a little bit because there's so much less weight on it. There's all the bodies are at MSG. All right, kind of did not stick the landing, but you got what I was going for. Okay.
Imagine Staten Island bobbing up and down in the ocean.
Yes, right. Maddie Moron, Hillary Crowder's family evidently released a statement that Crowder was emotionally abusive, lied about the circumstances of the abuse, and wasn't present for the children's birth. Leaked video accompanying the statement. I'm seeing that, but gonna hold off on commenting on that.
Yeah, we'll let other people
for now.
Go into those realms and then laugh about it later.
No, we're just covering what Crowder has said on his program for now.
But I hope Hillary gets justice.
Number 13, I'm sure you have all heard about the New York legislature and governor being unable to coalesce around solutions to the housing crisis. Has there been much local unrest about this? No. We should have on someone next week about like the state of the budget negotiations. But yes, I did mention this yesterday that it appears they're leaving out the affordable housing element as like New York has never been more unlivable. And there's a mass exodus from the public school system in a variety of areas in the city, because people have been unable to afford to live here, and then all the rich kids go to private school. It's like,
I'm hoping the commercial real estate market collapses and I can move into like One World Trade Center for like $1,200 a month.
Me too. I mean, we're all in favor of that. All right, let's do, you want to do this Ron Johnson thing?
Yeah, I think so. This
okay.
Stupid asshole.
So Ron Johnson won re-election. Good job, Democratic Party. That's why we spent so much money in Florida on the Val Demings race when everyone could basically see that was not going to be...
Elect the real cop.
Right. Instead of a really good candidate in Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin who had the juice. And Ron Johnson is not that popular, and yet he, frankly, was just not invested enough in by the National Democratic Party. One of the many missteps that they are consistently making. But they messed up, and we have Ron Johnson for a third term. We get these beautiful nuggets of intellectual questioning from Senator Ron Johnson. Here he is speaking with a climate expert or energy policy guy, Michael Greenstone. And Ron Johnson has some theories about how climate change may actually be a good thing.
I actually found that chart of yours somewhat comforting for at least America. When you take a look at the mortality risk, again, these are all projections. I don't put any stock in them whatsoever. In terms of excess deaths, a warming globe is actually beneficial. In my own state, your study shows that we'd have a reduction in mortality of somewhere between 54 and 56 people per, I guess it's 100,000. Why wouldn't we take comfort in that?
So thanks for the question, Senator Johnson. And what the work shows and the chart is that the effects of climate change are going to be very unequal. And absolutely, Wisconsin, Chicago, where I live, the reduction in cold days, the benefits from that will outweigh the damages from the hot days. But if you look more carefully at that, there's large swatches of the country where the damages will be much larger. And in fact,
but again, if you want to balance it all out globally, if you're trying to mitigate harm globally, isn't it true that the number of deaths, according to this Lancet study, the number of deaths caused by heat are 600,000 per year. Deaths caused by cold are 4.5 million annually. So the fact, in terms of global health, in terms of excess death, we're actually in a better position to prevent death by having the climate increase in temperature a little bit, right?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that study. What I am familiar with is my study. Your characterization of it is incorrect.
Well, your study is very favorable to my state. Our mortality declines by 54 per 100,000.
Wisconsin will benefit in terms of mortality. There are 49 other states in the United States. Many of them will suffer. Many of them will suffer more than Wisconsin will gain. And that is the nature of climate change. It's very unequal.
According to your study, you're concerned if you're in the really hot region of Africa, but in terms of the United States and most of Europe, we're in pretty good shape. We're all blue. We have reduced risk of death.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a great way to view the world, right?
So,
very bizarre.
Good thing borders are static and there are walls and no one can enter and there will be no climate migration. None of that's happened, right? Soon there will be people trying to move more towards the inland to avoid the effects of climate change. And then Ron Johnson will, for some reason, still be elected to the Senate at age like 102 and will be saying, well, we need to keep these dirty brown people out of our pristine Wisconsin area, which might also get hit with much colder temperatures because climate change doesn't just gradually increase the temperature of the planet, it increases the severity of weather events like we saw in Texas and in other states when they had those incredibly deadly winter storms.
I like the statement he made of, these are just projections, I don't put any stock into them. Unless I can read them narrowly in a way that bolsters my preferred policy prescriptions. Like, and I would also say about this Greenstone guy, I don't think he's like I'd never heard of him before, but he is the Milton Friedman a professor at the University of Chicago.
Oh, never
on
mind.
Climate. So it's like he's not exactly even like a radical lefty, and so I would be very suspicious of these. Even what this says about Indiana, like, okay, maybe eventually the climate will be a little bit warmer, but like extreme weather events, are you going to get more tornadoes? Like the idea.
How about flooding from melting of like snow and I mean, again,
there could be like all sorts of things. The idea that you're just going to take like, oh, it's going to be 10 degrees nicer, and you don't look into like, okay, is that going to like have any impact as far regards like what crops are able to be grown in the rural parts of our state? That's a massive. It's a climate. Like the thing about climate is it's not supposed to change.
How do we even address this really? Like, how do we address it, right? I mean, he's talking about Africa. What about like your own country? Like, there's not hot states here. Like, people living in the deserts of Arizona or New Mexico,
Florida,
or
California,
Texas, or Florida,
wildfires,
California, and then think about, what about people in Alaska? What are they going to do when things get hotter? It's just ridiculous. Like, and then of course you made the point about just crops in his own state. I mean, he's from Wisconsin, right? What are you going to do, buddy, when all the cows start dropping dead from heat? exhaustion out on the fields. What are you going to do all about that cheese, buddy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's trying to appeal to Wisconsinites there and be like, yeah, I've got your back against the rest of the world. And
also, if I was like,
but you just look like an idiot because you are.
Yeah, if I was also in one of those, like, say, parts of the globe that is going to be extremely disadvantaged by, say, extreme, like 10-degree rise in climate, and America is sitting over here contributing to it and also not doing shit and then talking about how it's actually good for them, I would become a terrorist or something.
Yeah.
Like, what does that say? How is that not like a declaration of like long-term warfare on the rest of the world?
Yeah, just we get ours and that's it. I mean, but that's the conservative philosophy fairly distilled. That's why folks in the Republican Party don't feel any urgency on climate change. It's like, I'll be dead. I don't care. I don't care about humanity. They don't have a humanist approach to the world. So that's why they're fixated on I'm going to get mine. But I don't even think this plays in Wisconsin, which just, by the way, finally made major gains in beating back the Scott Walker-ification of the state by electing pretty overwhelmingly. She won a Democratic candidate to control their Supreme Court. So the clock's ticking on guys like Ron Johnson, but he just got elected to another 6-year term. I just mean this kind of stuff isn't going to play with even the voters in Wisconsin, which do tilt more Democratic, even though the maps are drawn in a disadvantageous way.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a maybe different study, but what climate change means for Indiana. This is the EPA. Heavy precipitation and flooding. Changing climate is likely to increase floods in Indiana. The Ohio River flooding occasionally threatens both navigation and riverfront communities. I think we had Ohio River. Was that Ohio and Kentucky? Ohio River flooding, or like a tributary to the Ohio River? I think it was. There might be some decent impacts to like on the agriculture front. Increasing hot summers can reduce yields of corn and stuff like that, but you also get a longer growing season like that. But even then, who's benefited from this? Do we have trickle down capitalism, or was that in fact a lie?
And I also just it's just fascinating to see how conservative climate denial has evolved. It was first, it's not happening, shut up about it. Now it's happening, then it was, what was the next step there? It's not happening, but it's it's happening, but it's not man-made.
And we don't need to worry about it.
Right? It's not, but it's natural.
It's natural, yeah, it's the sunspots.
And now it's happening, but it's a good thing.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
All right, I want to do this Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, and then that'll be our final clip of the day, because this plays into some of the stuff we've talked about with COVID in schools. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, now that the Republicans control the House, she's no longer stripped of her committee assignments. She was instrumental in getting the crazy MAGA votes behind Kevin McCarthy, and so he's rewarded her by putting her on committees like the House Oversight and Accountability Subcommittee on select coronavirus crisis. That's where she is doing this questioning of Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Now, I have my misgivings with Randy Weingarten, particularly when it came to, her relationship with establishment Democrats like Hillary Clinton and stuff. But this is a pro-teachers unions show. And I support teachers unions broadly, even if you can have some tweaks with the leadership and their decisions.
Well, yeah, I mean, attack them from the left, particularly if you're part of the rank and file. But it's not the same. Like, Marjorie Taylor Greene does not, in my opinion, have the right to criticize unions.
Well, wait till you hear what she goes with in this criticism of Randy Weingarten. They're talking again about COVID policies, and here's MTG saying that Weingarten's not a real mother, so she wouldn't know and doesn't have the right to say anything.
Are you a mother?
I am a mother by marriage.
By marriage, I see.
And my wife is here with me, so I'm really glad that she's here. Rabbi Sharon Klein.
Ms. Weingarten, I reclaim my time. I didn't ask you a question. Sorry. What I'd like to talk about is your recommendations to the CDC as not a medical doctor, not a biological mother, and really not a teacher either. You had no business advising the CDC what the medical guidelines were for school closures, because now we have a nation of school children who have suffered because of it. The problem is people like you need to admit that you're just a political activist, not a teacher, not a mother, and not a medical doctor.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make note that the decorum of the attacks on the witness were unacceptable that the gentlelady from Georgia just did. And so it'd be nice if we didn't attack the witnesses, particularly whether and making a decision about whether or not she's a mother. You are a mother. Thank you for being a great parent. Thank you.
Your point of order is recognized, Mr. Garcia.
The implication there, though, is that Randi Weingarten is gay. So she can't be a mother. She has a wife. Can't be a mother. She didn't give birth to her child. She can't be a mother.
It's also like, I guess if you're a step parent, are you also not? Like,
not. Yeah. If you're an adoptive parent, you're not a mother in Marjorie Taylor Greene's eyes. Being a mother isn't a damn virtue. We know because you're a mother, Marjorie Taylor Greene. You're a biological mother. And
not a wife, though.
No longer a wife. Interestingly.
Wow! Not a wife, though.
Not a wife. In fact, I guess you're a single mother, right? You must have done something wrong in your life pathologically.
Might be doing a little bit too much torque-intensive exercises at the old
at the CrossFit Center. Yeah.
It's funny because, like teachers, saying that to Randi Weingarten, I mean, teachers spend more time with your kids than you do, quite frankly, during the week.
Seems that way.
Who has a bigger impact on, who has had a bigger impact on us as children than certain teachers that we had? That's who I think of, more than any, I guess maybe certain coaches in sports, but no other adult figures are as important to, shout out Senora Casa, my Spanish teacher, 4 years at Manning High School.
I mean, but she's not a teacher, Randi Weingarten. She's just the representative for them. And she represents their interests. Right. It's just the idea that Marjorie Taylor Greene is the one speaking for teachers here as opposed to their union representative. Would it matter if Randi Weingarten was currently a teacher and not a professional union leader? No, because they would still go after her for some reason. It's just I cannot believe that we're still talking about COVID policy in this way and still pretending like these Republicans have the children's interests in mind here. What they saw COVID policy, in particularly in Chicago, as an easy avenue for was a way to undercut teachers' unions. The Republican Party has been attacking teachers' unions for decades, for decades and decades. It's foundational to them because teachers' unions are a robust labor force, also and that are also intertwined with the public education system. It's teachers and teachers' unions epitomize everything that Republicans hate. So, yeah, she got to run the gamut there. Homophobia, COVID denial, anti-labor,
horrible person,
really horrible person who's now without a husband. No, yeah, moral failing, honestly.
Yeah,
because I heard she was fucking someone at the CrossFit gym.
That's what I heard too.
Yeah, I heard that. I mean, can't confirm or deny it, but now she can just make out with her Newsmax host or OAN guy on camera and make everyone sick in the process.
That was a great moment though, when she was getting interviewed in the car after she showed up in New York to defend. Did you see that?
Was it a great moment, Matt Binder, or was it actually nauseating?
Well, being a masochist.
Great moments in documenting sick degenerate freaks, which is that's what these people really are.
I really hate her.
Great to accept an interview, to be a journalist. I mean, it's Newsmax, but to launder yourself as a journalist, interview your subject, and then give him a peck on the head when you were done is amazing. Really.
Yeah, and I gotta say, this idea that we should look beyond all of this sort of stuff, which is the real deal that Marjorie Taylor brings to this stuff, and then applaud them like fucking seals every time they say something about populism or foreign policy that is on a very surface level agreeable is fucking stupid. And everyone that like traffics in that, I have no fucking respect for them.
All right, guys. One more call, really quick, then we will get out of here. 770, you're the final caller of the day. If you're there.
Hey.
Hey.
It's Robert from Georgia.
Robert from Georgia, what's on
How
your
you got?
mind?
Yeah. Well, Matt Leck talked about something a little earlier in the program, was kind of what I was going at, and that was this idea that the for Carlson hiring is something that it really isn't. I mean, I just don't feel like he's. It's not going to change Fox. They'll find somebody to fill the gap. And the other thing about whenever they talk about him being fired at CNN, MSNBC, blah blah blah, they leave out the fact that he had a program on PBS for a little while, and it was kind of like followed lawyers. That was very short-lived, and I think maybe his father had something to do with PBS that got him on there. But the guy, he's like Trump. It's just like it doesn't matter how bad they screw up. They always fall upwards.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know. It's just very depressing to think about.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Murdoch is the one that's the problem.
Yes.
Murdochs are the problem.
I know. I can't believe.
I mean, not that I no, really, he's.
Robert, did you see the story that he was engaged to some younger woman for his fourth marriage, and they ended up splitting up apparently because she was a little nuts. She was a little bit too close to the Fox viewer. She thought Tucker Carlson was ordained by God, and he was like, this might be a little too crazy, right? I have contempt for my viewership. They make me money, but I don't want to marry one of them.
Exactly, and the other thing about it is, it's not like this is the first big lawsuit that he's been slapped with. That thing in England where he hacked into the phones or something like that, and then that was he had that time, I don't know which wife it was, but I remember I think somebody tried to buy him or something at the Parliament hearing.
Yeah, Johnny Marbles pied him in the face. It was not the best moment.
But his wife, man, she was this gal.
She defended him as if she was having an affair with Tony Blair.
Yeah, exactly.
Really? I didn't know that.
I think that was the case. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Wow. All right, Robert Ball.
Well, I mean,
thank you for calling in.
Well, thanks a lot.
Any last thoughts before I let you go?
Oh, guys, keep up the good work. Love you.
Love you too.
Y'all.
All right. Letting them go. Gonna read some items and then we're gonna get out of here. Dan from Columbus, Trump voice. Many people are saying Marjorie has been getting busy with her CrossFit instructor at the gym, her CrossFit coach. I call him coach because CrossFit is a sport, Many people say it's one of America's greatest sports. A national pastime, they call it. Trump really loves football, which I love. Like that his attempts. He's tried to buy the Giants before. He tried to buy the Buffalo Bills too. I could see him though being into CrossFit or something like that, or at least the culture behind it. It really is a bizarre cult. Not the exercise part, but
I was just thinking of Trump getting on the bars.
Oh my God. I loved that. Who knows how real this nugget was, but do you remember during the 2016 election when it came out, like people spoke about his musings about exercise, how he didn't believe in it because he thought his body was a finite battery.
You only have so much energy.
And you don't want to drain it before you die. Bullprog, can't believe Weingarten would sexualize a congressional hearing by bringing up her wife, SMDH. Adam from Indiana, oof on the flooding. I live in a flood zone which flooded in 1982 and brought Reagan to town. The Army Corps of Engineers built a dike for a massive flood. Sounds like we could have more of those soon. Crowder and MTG should hook up. They can work out together. Not sure she's his type. Josh from Tucson. Arizona is already running out of water. Not sure what Ron Johnson thinks is good about anything climate change.
He's from Wisconsin. So.
Yeah. Between the 101 and the 5, flooding is great for yachts, though, guys.
That's what's funny about this is like it. I get why it might work for the upper Middle West Freedom Caucus sort of people, but it turns you into the biggest cuck in the world if you're a red state or a Republican in like Florida, for instance, because no, your shit's fucked.
Yeah, right.
Sorry for swearing so much, Sam's gone.
It's okay. We've gone hard today on that. Washington Post Malone. Happy birthday to me, Coretta Scott King, Casey Kasem, Cory Booker, George Jervin, Larry Elder, Lizzo, Cuba Gooding Sr., and Ulysses S. Grant. Sorry for all the names, but each one I found seems more funny and random than the last. Demian, still sort of stuck on the guy yesterday that said Michael would agree with him about Ukraine. I remember the moment I knew Hassan seemed like a decent person is when someone asked him what Michael would have thought about the subject, and Hassan said he didn't think it was appropriate to weaponize Michael's memory. And if you want to know what Michael would think, then read his book or watch his many hours of content.
Yeah, some people do like to say, I think he would have agreed with me, and I think it is. It can be annoying, but to me, it's like a pathetic rhetorical like attempt that I just see through.
I think that Michael would think that was annoying too. So.
Yeah.
He would. The thing about Michael is he would have such disdain for those people.
Yes. I mean, I just like, guys, try to win on the value of your argument. Don't use this like emotional ploy for someone who passed away, who like specifically with, Matt was very close. Like, it's just, it's slimy. It really is. And it shows that you don't think you can win on the merits of your argument, and you have like a weird parasocial issue where you don't understand that these were personal relationships and not just you consuming content.
It's like transparent that you got nothing else.
Yeah. Salt Lake Lefty, thoughts on George Santos theatrically tearing apart a Right to Work newsletter? I saw that. I wanted to play it, but I don't even know if he knows what he's doing, so...
It looks like he's going to run for president, though. So
I can't wait.
I wouldn't put it past him to think that he would think he could actually win, honestly.
No, well, I mean, I think like somebody said, like Matt Crispin's made the point that he has to because his relevance is going to die out because he'll get term limited out of office and governor. So he kind of needs to run. But yeah.
Yeah. Train Boy, I think Michael would have agreed with me that you all are awesome. Well, thank you, Train Boy. Congressional baseball fan, does anyone know if Amy Schumer has ever gotten to talk to the Baileys? I don't know.
Amy Schumer, what was her show called on Comedy Central?
Inside Amy Schumer, which has some really good sketches.
The sketch she did about the military video game where you're a female troop.
I don't remember that one.
It's dark, but just
it's a rape.
It's like you immediately get raped, and nobody in authority wants to hear about it.
It's really good. She also had like one of my favorites is the like fake boy band, like that's like, girl, you don't need makeup. And so she's like, and they're singing to her and she takes it off and they're like, actually put it back on. Like taking the piss out of those like faux empowerment songs from boy bands. Dave from Jamaica, I feel like Tucker's a bit more skilled at white supremacy than most. He will be replaced, but I don't think they'll find someone as good as he was at that. Oh, they'll find something else though, Dave, I think. All right, 5 more. Austin. I live in the Colorado desert. It's 101 degrees Fahrenheit today. Let me rip into the climate change now. Bullshit. 760. Sorry, Austin. Missed that before we turned off the phones. Dope Hope. Elon Musk pretending to be his 3-year-old son in Twitter explains a lot. Yeah, I haven't seen enough of this.
And there's Binder. Maybe you're probably on this. Like the sock puppet. Was that I guess the serfs were tweeting about? Did you see this about Elon? Or is that did you follow up on that?
he had a sock puppet, like an alt account that he unveiled. I can't tell if it was accidentally or not. He also unveiled that how many people actually subscribed, that because Twitter has this feature called subscriptions, where you could actually subscribe to someone, an individual Twitter account for like special paywalled content. And he showed that he had like close to 25,000 people paying him $4 a month for a total of something like just under $100K a month, which will, of course, in no time flat, pay that $44 billion Twitter bill. But yeah, right. So
you just gotta chip away at your debt. That's what you gotta do.
Yeah, it's only taken about 37,000 years.
One payment at a time. Right. Tell the Saudis, Vicky, it's coming.
Right. And so yeah, he had some alt where he looks like he was role playing as his 2 or 3-year-old son and saying really weird things about liking Japanese girls and things like this. And then another story came out where he actually has a third account that he doesn't use. And this one's interesting because he bought Twitter and immediately demanded that the engineers at Twitter remove the handle @E, just the letter E, from the user that was currently using it because he wanted it. So he just basically stole someone's Twitter username because he wanted just the one letter E, which, nice free speech. Everything will be very transparent. No one takes any sort of special, place above anyone else's system he's got going there,
Right.
Psycho.
All right, 3 more. Salve Cider. Hey, EmMajority Report. Can I get a shofar from my brother Spencer? It's his birthday and he turned me on to MR a few years ago. We were both members and loved the show. Left is best. I can't reach the soundboard, but I'll give you this from, a makeshift shofar. That's all right? Okay, thank you. Mark the Bard. Love you guys. Great show today. And the final I am of the day. Kowalski. Longer growing season is a bit hard to measure. For instance, by all accounts, we have a longer growing season this year, but for the last 10 days, temperatures dipped into the freezing levels, meaning if we would have taken advantage of the warm, dry weather a month ago, all of our crops would have been destroyed in the late frost. Weather instability is far more damaging than any gains of a longer growing season. Can we just feed Senator Johnson to a polar bear? It seems like the most humane thing to do. Well said, Kowalski.
Thank you, Kowalski.
All right, guys.
Also, thank you so much, Kowalski, for this I'll describe it, a canister
Left
tin,
Reckoning.
left reckoning sort of coffee clutch.
It's a
I guess.
thermos.
Thermos, yeah.
A coffee clutch.
I don't know what words I'm saying. Isn't that what people call these things these days? I don't know. But thank you so much, Kowalski.
All right. Well, watch Doom, Scam Economy, Left Reckoning, ESVN. Appreciate you all. Thanks, Binder. See you next week, and see you guys tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the man